In the twilight era of human ascendancy, known as the Dark Age of Technology, mankind spread across the stars with technologies now lost to the ravages of time. Among the most enduring legacies of this forgotten age stand the night worlds and their noble houses, bastions of feudal tradition amid the cold void of space. These worlds were established as agricultural colonies, supplying the vast human federation with resources, while their inhabitants developed distinct cultures centered around honor, duty, and martial prowess. The first night suits were deployed to these frontier worlds as practical tools, powerful walking engines designed to protect the colonists from hostile indigenous life forms and environmental threats. What began as utilitarian machines evolved into symbols of power and prestige as the colonies developed isolated feudal societies. The noble houses emerged naturally from this environment, with the most capable pilots and their descendants claiming hereditary rights to pilot these magnificent war engines. When the Age of Strife descended upon humanity and warp storms isolated these colonies from Terra, the night worlds were forced into self-sufficiency. Away from the wider human civilization, they developed unique cultural identities while maintaining their feudal structures. The night suits, once mere tools, became revered relics passed down through generations of noble families. Each house developed its own heraldry, traditions, and codes of conduct that would persist for millennia. The typical structure of a night house revolves around a central ruling family led by a high king or queen, surrounded by lesser nobles who owe fealty to their liege. This hierarchy extends downward through various ranks of knightly orders, with the right to pilot a night suit being the ultimate privilege that separates nobility from common folk. The social stratification is rigid, with commoners serving as peasants, craftsmen, and support personnel who maintain the infrastructure that allows the noble houses to focus on martial pursuits. Night worlds themselves vary tremendously in environment and culture, but most share certain characteristics: fortress keeps dotting the landscape, vast agricultural regions worked by peasantry, and training grounds where young nobles learn the arts of war. The societies are invariably martial in nature, with combat prowess and personal honor forming the cornerstone of their value systems. When the Emperor's Great Crusade rediscovered these isolated human worlds in the 30th millennium, the night houses faced a pivotal choice that would define their existence for thousands of years to come. This moment of contact led to the formalization of what became known as the Questoris Oath, sacred pledges of allegiance that bound the night houses to the greater Imperium. The Questoris Oath represents more than mere political alliance. It embodies a solemn compact that shapes every aspect of a night house's identity. Those houses that aligned themselves directly with the Imperium of Man became known as the Questor Imperialis. These Imperial Knights maintained greater autonomy and preserved more of their unique cultural identities, swearing oaths to serve the Emperor and defend humanity. Their allegiance was personal and feudal in nature, echoing the ancient bonds of lord and vassal rather than subsuming themselves into the imperial hierarchy. In contrast, those houses that pledged themselves to the Mechanicum became the Questor Mechanicus, also called the Night Houses Aligned. These houses formed symbiotic relationships with the tech priests, receiving advanced technical support, weaponry, and maintenance capabilities in exchange for their martial service. The Mechanicus houses typically adopt more of the beliefs and practices of the cult Mechanicus, including veneration of the machine god and the quest for knowledge. Their night suits often bear distinctive red livery, emblazoned with the half-skull cogwheel emblem of the Mechanicum, signifying their techno-religious devotion. The division between Questor Imperialis and Questor Mechanicus houses extends beyond mere allegiance. It shapes their battlefield roles, internal cultures, and even the configurations of their night suits. Imperial houses tend to favor Knight Paladin and Knight Errant patterns, versatile war machines suited for independent operation. Mechanicus houses, meanwhile, often field Knight Crusader and Knight Warden variants, designed to complement the forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus with overwhelming firepower. At the heart of every Knight suit lies the Throne Mechanicum, perhaps the most crucial technology that defines the Night Houses. Far more than a simple control system, The throne mechanicum forms a sacred bond between noble and machine that transcends ordinary pilot-vehicle relationships. When a young noble, typically between the ages of 10 and 14, first interfaces with the throne mechanicum, they undergo a ritual known as the becoming. This process permanently links their mind to the machine spirit of the knight suit. The throne mechanicum contains the accumulated memories and personality echoes of every pilot who has ever bonded with that particular knight. These imprints influence the current pilot, instilling them with the traditions, values, and martial instincts of their ancestors. This technological psycho-conditioning ensures continuity of purpose and reinforces the conservative values of the knight houses across generations. The bonding process is traumatic and dangerous. Young nobles face the combined psychological pressure of their ancestors' expectations while struggling to assert their own identity. Not all candidates survive with their sanity intact. Those who succeed emerge transformed, their personalities subtly altered to align with the values encoded in the throne, loyalty, honor, duty, and hatred of the Imperium's enemies. This technological inheritance preserves the cultural continuity of the knight houses across millennia, making them remarkably resistant to change or corruption. For the noble pilot, the knight suit becomes an extension of their body and identity. The neural link provided by the throne mechanicum allows for intuitive control of the massive war machine, translating the pilot's movements and intentions into the knight's actions with minimal delay. Experienced pilots describe the sensation not as operating a vehicle, but as becoming a giant, feeling the ground beneath the knight's feet, sensing impacts against its armor as pain, and experiencing the discharge of its weapons as extensions of their own limbs. This intimate connection explains why knights fight with a grace and personality absent in other Imperial war machines. Each knight moves with the distinctive style of its pilot, modified by the accumulated combat techniques of previous generations. Observers can often identify individual knights by their gait or combat maneuvers alone, even before noting their heraldry or markings. The cultural significance of honor among knight houses cannot be overstated. Unlike many imperial institutions that value victory at any cost, knight houses operate under strict codes of chivalry that govern all aspects of warfare and social interaction. These codes vary between houses, but typically emphasize personal courage, fair combat, protection of the weak, and maintaining one's word. Knights will often forsake tactical advantage to challenge worthy opponents in single combat, seeking to prove their martial prowess and bring glory to their house. This emphasis on personal honor extends to the appearance and maintenance of a knight's suit. The heraldry displayed on a knight's carapace tells the story of its pilot's lineage and achievements. Honorific markings, campaign badges, and kill markings are meticulously applied and maintained. A knight's appearance on the battlefield is considered a direct reflection of its pilot's worth, and nobles spend considerable resources ensuring their war machines are visually impressive as well as deadly. Tradition permeates every aspect of life on knight worlds. Daily routines follow patterns established thousands of years ago, with ritual observances marking the progression of seasons and significant events. Training methods for young nobles remain largely unchanged since the age of technology, emphasizing personal combat skills, horsemanship, and the mental discipline needed to master the throne mechanicum. The martial traditions of knight houses are particularly rich and varied. Many houses maintain specialized combat forms unique to their world, often incorporating the capabilities of their preferred knight patterns. House Terran, for instance, is renowned for its aggressive advance and strike tactics that maximize the effectiveness of their Reaper chainswords, while House Raven has developed intricate formations that create overlapping fields of fire from their favored Questoris Knight Crusaders. Ritual combat between nobles serves to settle disputes and establish hierarchies within houses. These duels may be fought personally with traditional weapons, or, in matters of great importance, with knights themselves in specially constructed arenas. Such contests are rarely to the death, but often result in serious injury or damage, demonstrating the value placed on martial skill above all other attributes. Knight worlds themselves reflect these martial values in their very landscape. Unlike the hive cities or forge worlds of the wider Imperium, Knight worlds typically feature vast open spaces where knights can operate effectively. Their architecture emphasizes defensive strongholds, massive keeps and fortresses designed to withstand siege and serve as bases for knight operations. Many of these structures date back to the dark age of technology, built with techniques now lost to human understanding. The relationship between a knight house and its world's population is fundamentally feudal. Commoners owe service and tribute to their noble protectors, working the land, maintaining infrastructure, and providing the material support that allows the knights to focus on warfare. In return, the knights defend their subjects from external threats and maintain order. This relationship, while inherently unequal, is taken seriously by most noble houses, who view the protection of their subjects as a sacred duty rather than merely an obligation. This feudal structure extends to relationships between houses as well. Lesser houses swear fealty to greater ones, creating complex webs of obligation and alliance. During times of war, these relationships determine how forces are mustered and commanded. A high king might call upon dozens of allied houses to form a formidable battle group, capable of turning the tide in major imperial campaigns. The knight house's integration into the wider Imperium remains partial and conditional. Unlike Space Marine chapters or Imperial Guard regiments, knight houses maintain significant autonomy in their internal affairs and deployment decisions. The Administratum and even the Inquisition tread carefully when dealing with knight houses, recognizing both their military value and the potential dangers of alienating such powerful allies. For the knight houses themselves, this semi-independence is a point of pride. They serve the Imperium not as subjects but as allies, maintaining their ancient identities even as they fight alongside the Emperor's other forces. This delicate balance of integration without absorption has allowed the knight houses to survive the tumultuous history of the Imperium relatively unchanged, preserving traditions that predate the Emperor's rise to power. The bonds that tied the knight houses to the Imperium, once forged in the fires of the Great Crusade, were never as absolute as the oaths sworn by the Adeptus Astartes or the servitude demanded of the Imperial Guard. This relative autonomy, while preserving the unique cultural identities of the knight worlds, also left fracture points where loyalty could break under sufficient pressure. The first cracks appeared not as dramatic betrayals, but as subtle shifts in allegiance, barely perceptible against the vast backdrop of imperial politics. The earliest documented Renegade Knights emerged during the latter stages of the Great Crusade, though such cases were rare and often quickly suppressed in imperial records. These initial defections typically stemmed from local grievances rather than ideological rejection of imperial rule. House Divine of Malech provides the most notorious early example, where the influence of Zeno's artifacts gradually corrupted the throne mechanicum of several knights, twisting their pilots' perceptions until they viewed imperial representatives as threats to their sovereignty. The tipping point came with the Warmaster Horus's rebellion in the early 31st millennium. The Horus heresy did not merely split the Imperium's military forces, it shattered the very concept of unquestioning loyalty to Terra. Knight houses found themselves caught in a conflict that demanded immediate choices with permanent consequences. Many houses remained steadfast in their loyalty to the Emperor, but others saw opportunity in Horus's ascendance or were swayed by the persuasive arguments of Mechanicum representatives who had themselves turned to the Dark Mechanicum. The traitor Primarchs understood the strategic value of knight support and targeted specific houses with tailored approaches. The word-bearers, masters of corruption and ideological subversion, focused on houses with grievances against imperial taxation or cultural restrictions. They whispered of autonomy and ancient rights, playing on the knight's inherent pride and sense of aristocratic privilege. Meanwhile, the Iron Warriors appealed to Mechanicus-aligned houses with promises of technological advancement unfettered by the restrictions of Mars, offering patterns of weaponry deemed too destructive or unstable by conventional Mechanicum standards. House Divine's fall exemplifies the complex interplay of factors that turned loyal knights to treason. When Horus's forces arrived at Malech, they found a fifth column already prepared. The corrupted throne mechanicum of House Divine's knights had gradually altered the perceptions of their noble pilots, making them susceptible to the War Master's overtures. What appeared to outsiders as a sudden betrayal had in fact been years in the making, as the tainted machine spirits whispered distortions and half-truths to generations of pilots. The moment of House Divine's betrayal proved catastrophic for loyalist forces on Malech. Knights who had stood as stalwart defenders suddenly turned their weapons against former allies, creating confusion and devastation that allowed Horus's forces to secure vital objectives. The psychological impact of this betrayal extended far beyond the immediate tactical setback. Throughout the Imperium, knight houses began to regard one another with suspicion, wondering if their allies might similarly harbor hidden corruption. The Horus heresy forced many knight houses to choose sides in conflicts where neither option aligned perfectly with their traditional values. Houses with ties to Forge worlds that had joined the War Master often found themselves pulled toward rebellion regardless of their own political inclinations. The practical reality of technical support and maintenance needs sometimes outweighed ideological considerations. A knight house cut off from its supporting Forge world faced slow degradation of its war machines, an existential threat to their way of life. Not all knights who turned from the Imperium during this period fell immediately to chaos corruption. Many initially fought for what they perceived as independence or traditional values against an Imperium they believed had betrayed its founding principles. Houses like Malanax and Aerthen positioned themselves as preservers of human autonomy against what they characterized as the Emperor's tyranny. This rhetorical framing allowed them to maintain a sense of honor even as they fought alongside forces that had clearly embraced the ruinous powers. The true horror of chaos corruption became apparent in the aftermath of the heresy. Knights whose thrones mechanicum had been exposed to warp energies began to exhibit disturbing transformations. The ancestral memories stored within these devices, once a source of stability and tradition, became conduits for demonic influence. Pilots found themselves experiencing the memories of ancestors now twisted by the warp, reliving battles that had never occurred or witnessing atrocities committed in the name of dark gods. The throne mechanicum's neural interface, designed to merge man and machine, proved particularly vulnerable to chaos influence. The intimate connection between pilot and knight allowed corruption to flow both ways. Knights with corrupted thrones began to physically transform, their adamantium plates growing organic protrusions or bleeding actual blood when damaged. In turn, their pilots underwent psychological and sometimes physiological changes, developing aggression, paranoia, or physical mutations that reflected their machine's corruption. The psychological effects of a corrupted throne mechanicum are documented in the forbidden text Mechanicum Hereticus, compiled by Inquisitor Vale in the 41st millennium. The testimonies of captured renegade knights describe a gradual erosion of identity as the corrupted memories of ancestors blend with demonic whispers. One noble of House Malanax reported experiencing the memories of 15 generations simultaneously, all screaming contradictory commands, while a voice that identified itself as a fragment of the blood god demanded violence against everything in sight. Most insidious is how chaos corruption exploits the very traditions and values that define knight culture. The emphasis on honor becomes twisted into excessive pride, the duty to protect warps into domination, and the respect for ancestors transforms into enslavement to their distorted memory echoes. A knight pilot from House Terran who fell to Slaanesh began to experience the sensations of combat as intense pleasure, leading to increasingly reckless battlefield behavior in pursuit of greater stimulation. Within 3 years, both knight and pilot had transformed beyond recognition, the once proud Imperial Knight now a grotesque engine of sensation-seeking. The physical corruption of knight suits follows patterns associated with the 4 major chaos powers, though some renegade knights bear the mark of undivided chaos or more obscure warp entities. Knights fallen to Khorne develop more aggressive weapon systems, often incorporating demon-bound blades that drink blood or cannons that fire superheated brass. Their armor plates become adorned with skulls, some decorative, others harvested from victims and fused to the knight's structure. These knights frequently modify their locomotion systems for greater speed, sacrificing stability for the ability to close with enemies more rapidly. Nurgle corrupted knights present a stark contrast, their once gleaming armor corroded and leaking unidentifiable fluids. Their internal systems become host to all manner of diseases and parasites, some of which are weaponized against enemies. The pilot chambers of such knights transform into incubation pods, where the noble exists in a state between life and death, sustained by the same diseases that should have killed them. These knights move with ponderous inevitability, their systems seemingly on the verge of catastrophic failure, yet continuing to function through impossible means. Tzynkian corruption manifests in constant, unpredictable change. Knights dedicated to the changer of ways develop weapons that transmute enemies into screaming crystal or living flame. Their armor plates shift configuration and sometimes color during battle, confounding targeting systems. Most disturbing are the additional sensory appendages that sprout from various points on the knight's structure: eyes, tentacles, or stranger organs that perceive aspects of reality invisible to normal human senses. The pilots of these knights often develop precognitive abilities, seeing seconds or minutes into potential futures. Slaaneshi knights emphasize speed and sensory overload, their weapon systems modified to produce excessive sound, light, or other stimuli alongside their deadly effects. Their pilot chambers become chambers of excess, where every sensation from the battlefield is amplified to overwhelming levels. These knights move with unnatural grace, sometimes incorporating additional limbs or prehensile attachments that allow for complex maneuvers impossible for standard knight patterns. Their pilots eventually become unable to function without the extreme sensations provided by the corrupted throne, becoming addicted to the experience of battle. Following the heresy, the next significant wave of knight defections occurred during the Nova Terra Interregnum in the 34th through 36th millennia. This period of division, where the Imperium Nihilus claimed independence from Terra, created another moment of forced choice for many knight houses. Houses in the Segmentum Pacificus faced practical governance questions that transcended simple loyalty. Some houses attempted to remain neutral, only to find themselves branded traitors by both sides and ultimately forced into true renegade status when the Imperium reunified. The age of apostasy in the 36th millennium drove another wedge between some knight houses and the Imperium. The excesses of Goj Vandar's reign tested even the strongest loyalties. Houses that had maintained their faith in the imperial creed found themselves conflicted when the ecclesiarchy's corruption became undeniable. Several houses in the Segmentum Tempestus renounced their imperial ties during this period, declaring that the Imperium had abandoned the Emperor's true vision. While some later returned to the fold following Sebastian Thor's reforms, others drifted further from imperial values during their independent period, falling prey to opportunistic chaos cults or Xeno's influence. House Maccabeus exemplifies the complex path from loyalty to renegade status during this turbulent period. Initially, the house opposed Vandar's religious enforcers when they attempted to impose new tithes on their knight world. What began as a political dispute escalated when Fraterist Templar forces bombarded civilian settlements in retaliation for the house's defiance. The Knights of Maccabeus, honor-bound to protect their people, turned their weapons against imperial ships. This act of defense was recorded as rebellion, and the house found itself declared excommunicate traitores despite still revering the emperor. Cut off from imperial support and branded traitors, House Maccabeus sought allies among other disaffected imperial factions. Their desperation led them to contact representatives of what they believed to be an independent human enclave, but was in fact a front for the Alpha Legion. Within a generation, subtle corruption had taken root in their throne mechanicum, and the house that had once stood against ecclesiarchical corruption found itself serving chaos undivided, its knights adorned with 8 pointed stars, where imperial aquilas had once proudly displayed. The psychological journey from loyal imperial knight to chaos, corrupted renegade rarely follows a straight path. Many fallen knights maintain the belief that they still serve humanity's best interests, even as they commit atrocities in the name of the ruinous powers. The throne mechanicum's influence plays a crucial role in this self-deception, as the machine spirit gradually recontextualizes the pilot's actions through the lens of corrupted ancestral memories. A knight might slaughter civilians while experiencing memories of ancestors defending settlements against genuine threats, the throne's machine spirit blurring past and present until the pilot cannot distinguish between them. For Mechanicus-aligned houses that fall to chaos, the corruption often begins in their understanding of the omnissiah. The quest for knowledge becomes perverted into a pursuit of forbidden technologies. Houses like Herpetrax and Morbidia started their fall by accepting technological gifts from Dark Mechanicum Forge worlds, weapon systems, or enhancements to their knights that gradually introduced scrap code into their throne's Mechanicum. The corruption spread from these initial contact points, eventually reaching the ancestral memories stored within the thrones and rewriting the house's perceived history and values. The Lords of Silence campaign in the Reductus sector during the 38th millennium demonstrates how vulnerable even stalwart knight houses can be to coordinated corruption. Death Guard forces targeted the agricultural output of House Krast's allied worlds rather than engaging their knights directly. As food supplies dwindled and disease spread among the civilian population, House Krast's knights were forced to spread themselves thin, protecting vital resources. Isolated knights were then subjected to targeted sorcerous attacks that planted seeds of corruption in their throne's Mechanicum. By the time the strategy became apparent, nearly a third of House Krast's knights had been compromised, forcing the loyal remainder to destroy their own kin in a devastating civil conflict. Not all Renegade Knights succumb to chaos corruption. Some maintain a precarious independence, becoming mercenary forces that sell their services to human factions outside Imperial control. These Freeblade renegades operate in the margins of Imperial space, typically in regions where Imperial authority is already weak. Without access to proper maintenance facilities, these knights often incorporate Xenos or prohibited technologies to keep their war machines operational. While technically traitors to the Imperium, they often maintain personal codes of honor and may even fight alongside Imperial forces against common threats like Tyrannid Hive fleets or Orc-Waag-s. The Adeptus Mechanicus has developed protocols for identifying early signs of knight corruption, though these are not foolproof. Changes in machine spirit behavior, unusual patterns in reactor output, or inexplicable modifications to weapon systems can indicate warp influence. The most reliable indicator remains the behavior of the knight in battle. Corrupted knights typically display increasing aggression, disregard for collateral damage, or attraction to specific targets that align with their patron power's preferences. By the time physical corruption becomes visible on the knight's structure, the infection has usually progressed too far for conventional remediation. For the Imperium, the existence of Chaos Knights represents both a military threat and a dire warning about the vulnerability of all human technology to warp corruption. Each fallen knight carries the weight of betrayed tradition and corrupted nobility, a perversion of values once aligned with humanity's defense, now turned against the species they were built to protect. The iconoclast houses represent the darkest reflection of knightly tradition, having fully embraced their allegiance to the ruinous powers. Unlike free blades who abandon their houses to pursue personal quests, or even renegades who merely reject imperial authority, the iconoclasts actively wage war against the Imperium they once served. These fallen knights have transformed their martial traditions into something grotesque, their ancient codes of honor twisted into dark parodies that still maintain the structure of nobility while serving utterly corrupted ends. House Divine stands as the archetypal cautionary tale of knightly corruption, its fall marking the first documented instance of an entire knight house pledging itself to chaos. During the Horus Heresy, Milech became a critical battleground, not merely for its strategic value, but for a hidden gateway the Emperor had once used to enter the realm of the Chaos Gods themselves. The Knights of House Divine had for generations served as guardians of this world, their throne's Mechanicum subtly influenced by proximity to this warp anomaly. When Horus's forces arrived at Milech, they activated dormant corruptions that had been seated within House Divine's thrones decades earlier. The noble pilots, already experiencing disturbing dreams and uncharacteristic thoughts, suddenly found themselves overwhelmed by foreign memories and impulses. In a single coordinated betrayal, the majority of House Divine's knights turned upon the loyalist defenders, their iron shields dropping to allow enemy forces through critical defensive positions. The most disturbing aspect of House Divine's betrayal was its methodical nature. Unlike the berserker rage often associated with chaos corruption, the fallen knights executed their treachery with cold precision. They targeted command structures, communication arrays, and loyalist knight formations with the tactical acumen of experienced warriors, suggesting that the corruption had not destroyed their martial skills, but merely redirected them. This calculated betrayal became the template for future iconoclast houses, maintaining combat effectiveness while serving new, darker masters. In the aftermath of the heresy, House Divine relocated to the Eye of Terror, establishing a new domain on the demon world of Colossi. There, the House's knights underwent accelerated physical corruption, their machines incorporating demonic entities and warp-forged components. The nobles themselves, those who survived the transition, became something neither fully human nor demon, but a disturbing amalgamation preserved by the throne's mechanicum that had corrupted them. For thousands of years, House Divine has launched raids from this hellish domain, each excursion into real space bringing back new captives and technology to further enhance their war machines. House Mandragor presents a different path to corruption. Once a minor Quester Mechanicus house pledged to the forge world of Cyclothwraith, House Mandragor was drawn into rebellion when their patron Forge declared for the Warmaster. Unlike House Divine, Mandragor's corruption came not through direct warp influence, but through technological heresy. The Dark Mechanicum adepts of Cyclothwraith modified their knights' thrones with forbidden neural interfaces that enhanced the pilot's capabilities while gradually eroding their humanity. By the 41st millennium, House Mandragor had evolved into something barely recognizable as a knight house. Their war machines incorporate extensive bionic augmentations, with boundaries between pilot and knight deliberately blurred. Mandragor knights often feature multiple limbs, asymmetrical weapon arrangements, and exposed components that pulse with unnatural energies. Their pilots, now completely subsumed by their machines, exist in a constant state of technological ecstasy, experiencing data feeds and sensory inputs that would drive unmodified humans insane. Not all iconoclast houses make their home in the Eye of Terror or other warp rifts. House Comentes controls a significant domain in real space, centered around the Obsidian system in the Segmentum Obscurus. Once Imperial Knights who guarded the approaches to the Cadian Gate, House Comentes turned traitor during the 10th Black Crusade when their planetary governor attempted to surrender to Chaos forces. The Knights, believing they acted to preserve their honor by refusing the governor's orders, ironically damned themselves by allowing Chaos cultists access to their fortress monastery. Within a decade, House Comentes had fully embraced Khorne, their once gleaming knights now adorned with brass trim and skull trophies. What makes Comentes particularly dangerous is their continued occupation of their original knight world. Unlike many traitor forces that retreat to the warp, Comentes maintains industrial facilities, training grounds, and recruitment protocols that mirror loyal houses. They continue to identify and train new pilots from bloodlines they consider noble, maintaining a twisted version of their former traditions while serving the blood god. Their domain has expanded to include 3 star systems adjacent to their homeworld, each conquered in bloody campaigns that left the original populations decimated but not exterminated. These subjugated worlds now exist to supply House Comentes with resources, technical expertise, and fresh candidates for throne bonding. Imperial forces have attempted to reclaim these territories 7 times, but each crusade has been repelled by the coordinated defense of Comentes Knights, supported by Chaos Space Marine allies and cultist armies. House Lucaris represents one of the most recent additions to the ranks of the iconoclast houses, having fallen during the Indomitus Crusade era. Their descent into heresy began with a succession dispute between twin siblings for the position of High Queen. When the Household Council selected Lysandra Lucaris over her brother Darius, he led a third of the house's knights in rebellion. Initially positioning themselves as a splinter faction fighting for legitimate rulership, Darius's forces gradually incorporated chaos iconography and modifications to distinguish themselves from their loyalist kin. The conflict might have remained a family matter if not for the intervention of the Alpha Legion, who saw opportunity in the divided house. Providing Darius with technical support and tactical guidance, they gradually introduced warp-tainted components into his knight systems. By the time Darius realized the true nature of his allies, his knights' thrones had been irreversibly corrupted, the machine spirits now bonded with minor demons of Tzeentch. Today, House Lucaris exists as two opposing forces: the Loyalist Knights under High Queen Lysandra, who fight desperately to defend their homeworld, and the Iconoclast Knights led by Darius, who raid from hidden bases throughout the sector. The Fallen Knights of Lucaris specialize in psychological warfare, often transmitting on Imperial frequencies during battles to sow confusion and targeting civilian populations to draw out Defender Knights. Their knights feature optical camouflage systems and disruption technology that allows them to approach targets undetected before launching devastating ambushes. The martial traditions of iconoclast houses often preserve perverse reflections of their original codes of honor. House Meraxus, dedicated to Slaanesh, maintains elaborate dueling protocols when challenging enemy knights. They announce their presence on open Vox channels, identifying themselves and their lineage before engaging. This is not mercy but cruel theater, the psychological impact of facing a corrupted knight that still observes the formalities of chivalric combat often unnerves loyalist opponents. Similarly, House Vextrix, followers of Nurgle, continues their tradition of the Reaping, once an annual ceremony where knights would ceremonially harvest the first crops of their agricultural world. Now, the Reaping involves knights methodically moving through populated areas, their scythe-like weapons collecting human victims rather than grain. The ceremony maintains its original structure and timing, with knights still reciting traditional blessings that have been corrupted into plague prayers. The hierarchical structure of knight houses provides a natural framework for chaos worship. The High King or Queen of an iconoclast house typically serves as the chief priest or priestess of their patron deity, with lesser nobles forming a dark priesthood. Commoners on iconoclast-controlled worlds exist in a state of perpetual terror, serving as both laborers and sacrificial offerings. Some houses, particularly those dedicated to Khorne or Slaanesh, maintain gladiatorial arenas where exceptional commoners can fight for the privilege of becoming knight pilots, though the process of bonding with a corrupted throne mechanicum ensures that even these elevated individuals suffer fates worse than death. The physical corruption of iconoclast knights varies dramatically based on their patron deity and the specific circumstances of their fall. House Terran's Splinter faction, which turned to Khorne during the Damno's campaign, features knights whose armor plates have fused with brass that bleeds when struck. Their close combat weapons have developed tooth-like serrations that chew through armor rather than cutting it, and their exhausts belch superheated blood rather than plasma waste. House Morton, dedicated to Tzeentch, fields knights whose forms constantly shift during battle. Weapon arms might suddenly sprout additional guns or transform into tentacles mid-combat. The cockpits of these knights have expanded into crystalline structures that refract light in impossible ways, creating disorienting visual effects that can trigger seizures in unprotected observers. Their pilots experience multiple possible futures simultaneously, making them unpredictable opponents who might counter attacks before they're launched. The throne's mechanicum of iconoclast knights serve as conduits for demonic influence, but they also preserve the house's history in corrupted form. When a new pilot bonds with an iconoclast throne, they experience not only the memories of their ancestors, but also visions implanted by the chaos powers, false histories showing betrayals by the Imperium or heroic last stands against imperial oppressors. These manufactured memories help justify the house's fall in the minds of new generations, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of corruption. Most iconoclast houses maintain some form of the becoming ritual, though twisted to serve their new allegiances. House Comentes requires potential pilots to slay their predecessors in ritual combat, consuming part of the former pilot's body before bonding with the throne. House Lucaris exposes candidates to warp energies that trigger mutations, accepting only those whose changes align with Tzeentch's aesthetic. House Mandragor's aspirants undergo extensive surgical modification before even approaching a throne, with most candidates dying during the increasingly extreme procedures. The technical capabilities of iconoclast houses often exceed their loyal counterparts, unbounded by the restrictions of Imperial technology. House Draken's Knights incorporate xenotech components harvested from Eldar Wraithbone, creating hybrid machines capable of limited Wraithslip teleportation. House Vextrix has developed biological weapon systems that spew corrosive compounds capable of dissolving adamantium, their knights' internal systems protected by layers of demon-blessed fungal growth that absorbs the backsplash of these weapons. Despite their corruption, iconoclast houses maintain complex relationships with other chaos forces. They rarely submit completely to the authority of Chaos Space Marine warbands or demonic legions, instead forming alliances of convenience that preserve their autonomy. This independence stems from the same aristocratic pride that characterized them as loyal knights, now perverted into arrogance. Even in Damnation, the noble pilots consider themselves aristocracy, viewing other chaos forces as necessary but lesser allies. The threat posed by iconoclast houses extends beyond their military capabilities. Their continued perversion of knightly traditions serves as a dark mirror to loyal houses, a constant reminder of how easily honor can become hubris and duty can transform into damnation. Each iconoclast knight on the battlefield represents not merely a powerful enemy, but a potential future for any knight who strays from the Emperor's light, a walking testament to nobility fallen from grace. While iconoclast houses represent knights who have fallen to chaos through corruption, betrayal, or necessity, the infernal houses embody a far more deliberate and terrifying evolution of the knight concept. These are not merely corrupted knights, but purpose-built engines of destruction, created through direct pacts with the ruinous powers, and designed from their inception to serve as vessels for demonic entities. The origins of the infernal houses can be traced to the immediate aftermath of the Horus Heresy, when the Dark Mechanicum sought to create war machines that could harness the raw power of the warp without the limitations of traditional knight technology. The first documented infernal knights emerged from the Hellforges of Zana II, where Dark Mechanicum adepts performed blasphemous rituals to bind demons directly into the frames of captured knight suits. Unlike the gradual corruption of a throne mechanicum, these early experiments involved the complete removal of the traditional interface and its replacement with a warp-attuned resonance chamber. These chambers, lined with arcane sigils and constructed from materials soaked in sacrificial blood, served as anchoring points for demonic entities dragged screaming from the Immaterium. House Mephitica stands as the earliest successful implementation of this technology, formed when Archmagos Dracovac bound 17 greater demons of Nurgle into modified Knight Paladin chassis. The resulting war machines bore little resemblance to their original forms, their adamantium plates bulging with unnatural growths and leaking corrosive fluids that dissolved the ground beneath their feet. Each step these abominations took spread contagion across the battlefield, while their weapons, no longer conventional armaments but extensions of the demon within, spewed forth impossible diseases that could corrupt both flesh and machine. The binding process for these early infernal knights proved exceptionally dangerous, with only 1 in 20 rituals producing a stable demon engine. The others resulted in catastrophic warp breaches that consumed entire forge complexes. Yet the Dark Mechanicum persisted, refining their techniques through centuries of trial and horrific error. By the 33rd millennium, the process had been standardized enough that entire production lines on demon worlds could create infernal knights with relative consistency. Unlike iconoclast houses, which maintain perverted versions of their original hierarchies, infernal houses organize themselves according to demonic principles. House Korak, dedicated to Khorne, structures itself as a gladiatorial hierarchy, where each knight's position is determined solely by its tally of kills. The most successful infernal knights command lesser engines in battle, with leadership changing hands after each engagement based on performance. This constant competition drives House Korax Knights to ever greater feats of destruction, each seeking to outdo its brethren to maintain dominance. The binding rituals that create an infernal knight vary significantly depending on the patron god being served. For Kornate infernal houses, the process begins with the sacrifice of 1,000 warriors in single combat, their skulls forming a massive pyramid atop which the knight chassis is placed. As the final sacrifice, typically a Space Marine champion or rival knight pilot, is made, their blood is channeled through specially designed conduits into the knight's core. The demon is then summoned into this blood-soaked vessel, merging with the mechanical components to create a hybrid entity that exists simultaneously in real space and the warp. Nurgle-dedicated infernal houses employ far more protracted and agonizing rituals. House Draghaste's creation ceremony involves burying candidate knight suits in mass graves filled with plague victims, leaving them to marinate in disease for 7 years. During this time, the would-be pilots are subjected to every known plague in the Dark Mechanicum's extensive catalog, their bodies becoming incubation chambers for custom-designed contagions. Those few who survive this process, though survive hardly describes their rotting, semi-conscious state, are sealed within the excavated knights, their flesh bonding with the disease-saturated machinery as a demon of Nurgle takes residence in the amalgamation of suffering that results. Tzeentchian infernal houses emphasize sorcerous binding over physical corruption. House Kallaxer's knights begin as conventional patterns that undergo 999 modifications, each accompanied by ritual incantations that gradually erode the boundary between material and immaterial. The final transformation occurs when a conclave of 9 sorcerers simultaneously casts their consciousness into the knight systems, their minds serving as a bridge through which a Lord of Change can manifest. The sorcerers themselves are consumed in the process, their knowledge and memories becoming part of the demonic consciousness that controls the knight. Perhaps most disturbing are the Slaaneshi infernal houses, whose creation rituals focus on the perversion of the traditional bond between noble and knight. House Deletion's pilots enter their knights willingly, believing they are undergoing an enhanced version of the becoming ritual that will grant them unprecedented sensory experiences. The knights themselves have been modified with sensory apparatus that initially provides extreme pleasure to the pilot. As the ritual progresses, the intensity increases beyond human tolerance, the pilot's nervous system burning out and regenerating in cycles of agony and ecstasy. At the critical moment, when the pilot exists in a state between unimaginable pleasure and unbearable pain, a keeper of secrets enters the knight, merging with both machine and pilot to create an entity driven by insatiable sensation hunger. The physical appearance of infernal knights reflects both their patron deity and the specific circumstances of their creation. House Morbidusfield's knights, whose forms constantly shift between states of decay and regeneration, plates of armor sloughing off to reveal writhing internal components before growing back in new, more disturbing configurations. Their primary weapons appear as massive, pus-filled appendages that burst when aimed at enemies, projecting streams of supernaturally virulent toxins that can corrode even ceramite armor. House Vulcanus, dedicated to Khorne, operates knights whose thermal reactors have been replaced with miniature forges powered by the blood of their victims. These knights run hot enough to melt the ground beneath them, leaving trails of vitrified earth as they charge across battlefields. Their close combat weapons glow with unnatural heat, cutting through enemy armor while cauterizing the wounds to ensure their victims suffer longer before death. The pilots of these knights, if they can still be called pilots rather than components, exist in a state of perpetual immolation, their flesh constantly burning yet never fully consumed. The weapons developed by infernal houses defy conventional classification in the Imperium's ordnance catalogs. House Spectrix, aligned with Tzeentch, fields knights armed with crystalline projectors that don't merely damage targets, but fundamentally alter them at a molecular level. Imperial tanks hit by these beams might find their armor transmuted into glass, their crew transformed into screaming crystalline statues, or their ammunition spontaneously achieving sentience and detonating in patterns that form complex mathematical equations when viewed from orbit. House Carnivore, serving Slaanesh, has developed the harmonic disintegrator, a weapon that projects concentrated sound waves calibrated to match the resonant frequency of whatever material it targets. Against infantry, these weapons cause victims to vibrate until their bones shatter and organs liquefy, all while experiencing either excruciating pain or inappropriate pleasure depending on the demon's whim. When directed against vehicles or structures, the disintegrator can cause catastrophic harmonic failure, making even the strongest materials tear themselves apart from within. The battlefield role of Infernal Knights often differs significantly from their Imperial or even iconoclast counterparts. While traditional knights function primarily as heavy support or line breakers, Infernal Knights frequently serve as focal points for larger demonic manifestations. House Malefic's Knights carry specially designed warp beacons that thin the veil between real space and the Imperium in their vicinity, allowing lesser demons to manifest without the need for conventional summoning rituals. A single Infernal Knight can thus serve as a mobile portal, bringing demonic reinforcements directly to critical points in battle. The campaign of terror against the agri-world of Sanctus Cerebus demonstrates the devastating potential of infernal houses operating at full capacity. In the 38th millennium, 3 Infernal Knights of House Pestilox made planetfall in different hemispheres of this vital food production world. Each knight carried within it a unique strain of the Destroyer Plague, modified by Nurgle himself to target specific crop species. As the knights rampaged across farmlands, they released these contagions, which spread at an impossible rate through both natural ecosystems and the world's irrigation networks. Imperial defenders, expecting a conventional assault, deployed their forces to protect population centers and industrial facilities. By the time they realized the true nature of the attack, nearly 80% of the planet's food production had been irreversibly contaminated. The remaining knights of House Pestilox arrived 3 weeks later, when the defenders were already weakened by food shortages, and the first wave of disease had spread to the human population. The ensuing massacre was less a military engagement than a harvesting, with the Infernal Knights collecting the diseased and dying for transport back to their demon world, where their suffering would power further rituals. The relationship between infernal houses and their patron deities is far more direct than that of most chaos worshippers. The demons bound within their knights serve as direct conduits to their gods, receiving instructions and power without the need for intermediaries. This connection manifests physically during major warp storms or in areas where the veil is thin, with Infernal Knights temporarily growing in size and power as their demonic components extend further into real space. During the Crimson Slaughter's assault on Belisar V, Infernal Knights of House Vulcanus were observed to double in size when fighting near the warp rift at the planet's northern pole, their forms becoming more demonic than mechanical. Despite their supernatural nature, Infernal Knights require maintenance and occasional rebinding rituals to maintain their coherence in real space. The Dark Mechanicum Forge worlds that support infernal houses develop specialized facilities for these procedures, combining conventional repair bays with ritual chambers where sacrifices can be made to appease the bound demons. The technical adepts who perform these services occupy a position somewhere between mechanics and priests, their knowledge encompassing both the material science needed to repair adamantium plates and the warp lore required to soothe an angry demon. The pilots of Infernal Knights, to the extent that this term remains applicable, exist in states that defy conventional understanding of human consciousness. Those who undergo the binding ritual rarely retain their original personalities intact, instead becoming hybrid entities where human, demon, and machine intelligence blend into something new and horrifying. Survivors of encounters with disabled Infernal Knights report hearing multiple voices emanating from the cockpit, speaking in languages both recognizable and impossible, sometimes carrying on arguments between the different aspects of the pilot's fragmented consciousness. In rare cases, the human element retains enough awareness to experience the atrocities committed by the Infernal Knight, trapped as a passenger in their own body, as the demon uses their knowledge and skills to maximize destruction. Inquisitorial interrogation of a captured pilot from House Delition revealed that the human component existed in a state of perpetual sensory overload, experiencing every kill every destruction with supernatural intensity. The pilot described the sensation as drowning in an ocean of sensation, unable to distinguish pleasure from pain, constantly aware that I am both victim and perpetrator. The strategic threat posed by infernal houses extends beyond their considerable battlefield presence. Their ability to weaken the barrier between real space and the warp makes them valuable assets for larger chaos incursions. During Abaddon's 13th Black Crusade, Infernal Knights of House Chromatic were deployed to key Imperial Shrine worlds not for their military value, but for their ability to desecrate these spiritually significant locations, creating weaknesses in reality that could later be exploited by larger demonic forces. The Imperium's response to the threat of infernal houses has evolved as understanding of these abominations has improved. Initial encounters often proved catastrophic, as conventional anti-knight tactics proved insufficient against war machines that could regenerate damage, phase partially out of reality, or continue fighting even after sustaining what should have been critical damage. The Ordo Malleus eventually developed specialized protocols for engaging infernal knights, emphasizing the use of sanctified weapons and psyker support to target the demonic component rather than merely damaging the physical structure. The Grey Knights chapter maintains dedicated knight hunting kill teams, equipped with warp-attuned weapons designed to sever the connection between demon and machine. These specialist squads deploy from orbit directly onto or near infernal knights, using teleport homers calibrated to lock onto the unique warp signature of a bound demon. Once in position, they employ focused null field generators and sanctified melta charges to destroy the resonance chamber at the knight's core, banishing the demon back to the warp and rendering the war machine inert. For loyalist knight houses, encounters with infernal knights represent the most disturbing possible perversion of their traditions and technology. The sight of these demon engines using familiar knight chassis to commit unspeakable atrocities has driven more than one noble to suicidal fury on the battlefield. House Terran maintains a special company of knights dedicated solely to hunting down and destroying infernal knights, their suits decorated with wards and blessings from the ecclesiarchy that provide limited protection against the reality warping effects these abominations project. As the 41st millennium draws to a close and the galaxy is split by the Great Rift, infernal houses have found unprecedented opportunities for expansion. The weakened barriers between dimensions allow for easier binding rituals and more stable demon engine integration. New infernal houses have emerged in the wake of the Cicatrix Maledictum, some formed from scratch on demon worlds within the Rift, others created when existing iconoclast houses sought greater power through direct demonic binding. The path from honored Freeblade to Renegade Knight represents perhaps the most tragic trajectory in the dark annals of Knight history. Unlike the mass corruption of iconoclast houses or the deliberate demonic engineering of infernal knights, these are solitary warriors whose fall carries the weight of personal betrayal and individual damnation. The knight known as Crimson Reaper began his career as Sir Darius Thorngard of House Hawkshroud, renowned for his precision strikes against orc artillery positions during the Calverna Crusade. After witnessing the slaughter of his household by Dark Eldar raiders, Thorngard took the Freeblade Oath, repainting his knight errant in blood red with a white death's head on its carapace. For nearly 3 decades, he served with distinction alongside Imperial forces throughout the Ultima Segmentum, developing a reputation for reliability unusual among Freeblades. The corruption began subtly during the desolation of Osseous campaign against Word-Bearer's forces. Thorngard's knight sustained damage to its throne mechanicum when a direct hit from a Defiler's battle cannon breached the cockpit shielding. Emergency repairs conducted by an understaffed Mechanicus detachment failed to detect the microscopic shards of a shattered Word-Bearer's icon that had embedded themselves in the neural interfaces. Over the following months, these fragments leached chaos energy directly into the throne's systems. Thorngard first noticed changes in his dreams. Ancestral memories normally experienced during rest periods began featuring scenes of slaughter that never occurred in House Hawkshroud's history. His knight's machine spirit grew increasingly aggressive, urging attacks on targets Thorngard had not selected and overriding safety protocols to maximize damage. Imperial commanders noted the Crimson Reaper taking tactical initiative that often resulted in excessive civilian casualties, but such behavior remained within the acceptable parameters for a knight driven by vengeance. The final break came during the defense of St. Jackson's Reliquary. When Space Marines from the Celestial Lions chapter questioned Thorngard's targeting priorities after he obliterated a hab block to reach a single word bearer's infiltrator, the Knight systems locked into automatic response mode. The Crimson Reaper turned its thermal cannon on the Space Marines, vaporizing 3 battle brothers before they could react. In the ensuing battle, Thorngard fled into the Underhive, his Knight systems now completely corrupted. The machine's spirit and pilot merged into a single entity dedicated to Khorne. Today, the Crimson Reaper haunts the war zones of the Ultima Segmentum, appearing without warning to engage Imperial Knights in single combat. The once noble Thorngard now collects the heads of Loyalist Knights, mounting them on his carapace as trophies. His targeting systems have been modified to detect the unique energy signatures of Throne Mechanicum systems, allowing him to hunt his former peers with terrifying efficiency. Most disturbing are the Vox transmissions he broadcasts during these duels, technically perfect recitations of the Hawkshroud battle rites, performed with flawless precision, even as he commits the very atrocities these codes were designed to prevent. The psychological trauma that transforms a Freeblade into a renegade often stems from the unique vulnerabilities created by their solitary status. Without the support structure of a Knight house, Freeblades rely entirely on their own moral compass and the guidance of their throne's ancestral memories. When either becomes corrupted, there are no brother knights to notice the subtle changes in behavior or intervene before corruption takes root. Lady Morgana Hellstrike of the Freeblade, known as Obsidian Crown, demonstrates how isolation creates vulnerability. After her house was destroyed by Tyrannid forces, Hellstrike dedicated herself to hunting splinter fleets across the eastern fringe. For 7 years, she operated independently, making brief contact with Imperial forces only to resupply before returning to her hunt. This isolation meant that when she discovered a crashed Genestealer cult vessel, there was no one to warn her of the danger or prevent her from investigating too closely. The physical corruption of Hellstrike's Knight began with the integration of Tyrannid biomorphs she harvested from her kills, initially as trophies, but later as functional components. She replaced damaged hydraulic systems with Tyrannid sinew, justified as field expedients when proper parts were unavailable. The Throne Mechanicum, designed to merge pilot and machine, gradually incorporated these Xenos elements into its understanding of the Knight's proper form. Within 2 years, the Obsidian Crown had developed chitinous growths over its adamantium plates, and its weapon systems had been modified to project bioplasma harvested from Tyrannid organisms. Hellstrike herself underwent physical transformation, her neural link with the corrupted throne causing her body to develop Tyrannid characteristics. When finally encountered by an Ordo Xenos investigation team, the pilot chamber contained not a human woman but a hybrid entity. Her lower body fused with the throne, while her upper torso had developed extra limbs and sensory organs consistent with Tyrannid adaptation patterns. The Obsidian Crown now leads hunting packs of Tyrannid organisms through Imperial space, her Knight's machine spirit somehow able to exert control over lesser Tyrannid bioforms through a corrupted version of the Synapse link. The fallen Freeblade known as Nightmare Ascendant exemplifies the corruption of noble purpose. Circassius drave an abandoned house crashed after disagreements over battlefield priorities, taking his Knight Crusader to fight independently against Chaos forces along the Cadian Gate. His personal crusade was driven by the belief that House Krast had become too politically entangled with Mechanicus concerns, neglecting their primary duty to protect human worlds. Draven's fall began not with chaos corruption, but with psychological deterioration, as he witnessed atrocity after atrocity committed by Chaos forces. His Throne Mechanicum, calibrated for the structured environment of House Krast, struggled to process the constant exposure to warp influence and human suffering. The ancestral memories began to fragment, creating gaps in the psychological support system that should have maintained Draven's mental equilibrium. Into these gaps seeped the influence of Tzeentch, not as direct corruption, but as subtle alterations to Draven's perception. He began to see patterns of betrayal in Imperial command decisions, interpreting tactical withdrawals as abandonment and resource allocation as deliberate sabotage of his mission. The Knight's machine spirit, reflecting its pilot's paranoia, developed targeting aberrations that identified Imperial forces as potential threats, assigning them threat values nearly as high as confirmed Chaos units. The transformation accelerated when Draven recovered a damaged data core from a destroyed Chaos vessel, integrating it into his Knight systems to extract strategic information. The scrap code contained within infected his augur arrays, replacing actual battlefield data with manufactured scenarios that confirmed his worst suspicions. By the time Draven opened fire on an Imperial Guard command center he believed had been infiltrated, the corruption had progressed beyond redemption. Now the Nightmare Ascendant stalks the edges of war zones, its once pristine white and red heraldry transformed into swirling patterns of iridescent blue and purple that change configuration as the Knight moves. Its weapon systems fire projectiles that transform mid-flight, turning from solid shells to screaming avian entities that seek out victims with preternatural accuracy. Most dangerous is Draven's strategic brilliance, now turned against his former allies. He retains perfect recall of Imperial tactical doctrines and exploits this knowledge to maximum effect, anticipating responses and laying traps that demonstrate intimate familiarity with Astra Militarum and Space Marine protocols. Hunting packs of renegade freeblades represent a relatively recent phenomenon, first documented during the Chaos incursions following the fall of Cadia. These loose confederations of fallen knights operate without the structured hierarchy of iconoclast houses, instead forming temporary alliances based on shared targets or compatible hunting styles. What makes these packs particularly dangerous is their unpredictability. Without the consistent doctrine of a knight house, their tactics change with each engagement, making it difficult for Imperial forces to develop effective countermeasures. The pack known as the Crimson Concordat exemplifies this dangerous new development. Comprised of 5 fallen freeblades, each corrupted by Khorne through different circumstances, the Concordat operates in the Nachmund Gauntlet region, targeting Imperial Knight houses with precision strikes designed to eliminate command elements. Unlike the Berserker charges typical of Khornate forces, the Concordat employs sophisticated ambush tactics, using their intimate knowledge of Knight operational protocols to predict movement patterns and communication methods. The leader of the Crimson Concordat, a massive Knight tyrant known as Bloodrot, was once Sir Maximilian Dorn of House Tyrannes. His corruption came through a damaged throne mechanicum salvaged from a battlefield and installed without proper sanctification. The other members include former knights from houses Raven, Vulker, and two whose original heraldry has been completely obscured by Chaos modifications. Each maintains a distinct combat style and weapons configuration, allowing the pack to adapt to different tactical situations. Their hunting methodology follows a consistent pattern: initial surveillance using corrupted servo skulls to identify knight formations, followed by targeted strikes against command and communication units. They prioritize the capture of damaged knight suits over outright destruction, dragging disabled engines back to hidden bases where Dark Mechanicum allies extract the Throne Mechanicum for corruption and reuse. Imperial analysts believe the Concordat has accumulated at least 20 additional knight chassis through these operations, though only 5 operate together at any time. The psychological impact of facing former Freeblades in battle extends beyond their considerable martial capabilities. For loyal knights, these encounters represent a perversion of everything the Freeblade tradition stands for: independence corrupted into betrayal, honor twisted into predatory cunning. Many knight houses now maintain specific protocols for engaging fallen Freeblades, emphasizing the importance of destroying the Throne Mechanicum to prevent the corruption from spreading through salvaged components. Perhaps the most infamous duel between loyal and fallen Freeblades occurred during the Battle of Helios Praximus, where the loyalist White Warden faced the chaos-corrupted Obsidian Reaver. Both knights had once belonged to House Durin before taking separate paths as Freeblades following the house's destruction. For 17 years, they had operated independently in Imperial service until the Obsidian Reaver's pilot, Sir Vortigern Durin, succumbed to warp influence after extended operations near the Eye of Terror. The White Warden, piloted by Vortigern's brother Alaric, tracked the corrupted knight across 7 systems, finally confronting him amid the ruins of an ancient cathedral complex. Their duel lasted nearly 6 hours, devastating the surrounding city as they employed increasingly desperate tactics. Both pilots accessed ancestral memories from their time in House Durin, anticipating each other's maneuvers based on shared training. The battle ended when Alaric sacrificed his knight's shield arm to create an opening for a point-blank melta blast to his brother's cockpit. The aftermath of this confrontation yielded valuable intelligence on fallen Freeblade psychology. Alaric Durin, though mortally wounded, survived long enough to undergo inquisitorial interrogation. He reported that throughout the battle, his brother's Vox channel had remained open, broadcasting not threats or chaos invocations, but childhood memories they had shared, interspersed with pleas for understanding. This suggested that even in his corrupted state, some fragment of Vortigern's original personality remained aware of his fall, perhaps deliberately drawing his brother into a confrontation that would end his corruption through death. The Ordo Malleus has identified several distinct patterns of corruption among fallen Freeblades, each requiring different containment strategies. Those corrupted through damage to their throne mechanicum typically exhibit rapid psychological deterioration, their personalities subsumed by the chaos entity infiltrating their neural link. These cases present as straightforward possession and respond to standard Malleus exorcism protocols if captured intact. More insidious are cases where corruption stems from the pilot's own psychological trauma, with the throne mechanicum merely amplifying existing vulnerabilities. The fallen Freeblade Sable Sorrow exemplifies this pattern. Lady Isolde Vernaxis became a Freeblade after witnessing Drukhari raids on her homeworld, dedicating herself to hunting Dark Eldar wherever they appeared. Her obsession gradually transformed into fascination, her knight systems modified to inflict increasingly elaborate torments on captured enemies. By the time her corruption became evident to Imperial observers, her knight had developed sonic weapons designed specifically to stimulate pain receptors while keeping victims conscious. The transition from vengeance to sadism occurred so gradually that the throne mechanicum accepted each modification as consistent with Lady Vernaxis's core mission, its machine spirit adapting to her shifting values rather than providing the stabilizing influence intended by its designers. This form of corruption proves particularly resistant to conventional countermeasures, as the chaos influence roots itself in authentic human emotion rather than external possession. For Imperial commanders, encounters with fallen Freeblades require specialized tactical approaches. The standard knight hunting protocols employed against iconoclast houses often prove ineffective against these unpredictable opponents. Inquisitor Heimdall's Broken Shield doctrine, developed after extensive analysis of fallen Freeblade engagement patterns, emphasizes psychological warfare alongside conventional attacks. By broadcasting specific recognition codes used by the knight's former house or manipulating Vox channels to simulate ancestral voices from the throne mechanicum, Imperial forces can sometimes induce hesitation or confusion in the corrupted pilot. The Adeptus Mechanicus maintains dedicated research facilities on Mars where captured fallen Freeblade components are studied under strict containment protocols. Tech priests of the Ordo Reductor have developed specialized weaponry designed to target the unique vulnerabilities of corrupted knights, including EMP pattern disruptors calibrated to the specific frequencies used by tainted throne mechanicums and blessed null field generators that can temporarily sever the connection between demon and machine. As the galaxy enters the era Indomitus, with warp storms dividing the Imperium and Chaos forces exploiting new opportunities for corruption, the threat posed by fallen Freeblades continues to evolve. Reports from the Imperium nihilists suggest that entire cadres of once loyal freeblades have turned renegade after extended isolation from Imperial authority, forming new hunting packs that combine knight technology with Xenos augmentations and forbidden weaponry scavenged from abandoned battlefields. The physical corruption of a knight suit begins not with dramatic transformation, but with subtle alterations barely perceptible to outside observers. When exposed to warp energies, the adamantium plates of a knight's carapace develop microscopic fissures that follow patterns resembling forbidden sigils. These hairline fractures, invisible to standard scanning equipment, act as conduits for warp energy to seep into the knight's internal systems. Mechanicus tech priests who have examined captured corrupted knights note that these fracture patterns consistently form regardless of the specific chaos power influxing the machine, suggesting an inherent vulnerability in the knight template itself. As corruption progresses, the external appearance of the knight begins to change in ways that reflect its new allegiance. Questorus-class knights dedicated to Khorne develop ridged protrusions along their armor plates, resembling serrated edges that can inflict damage even during glancing contacts. The hydraulic systems that power their limbs begin to pulse with unnatural rhythm, causing the knight to move with predatory fluidity, unlike the measured stride of loyal engines. Most distinctive is the transformation of the knight's exhausts, which begin to emit superheated vapor that condenses into blood like droplets, staining the ground where the knight treads. House Korax knights exemplify this corruption pattern. Their Questorus-class engines retain their basic silhouette, but develop organic-seeming musculature beneath the armor plates, visible through deliberately created gaps in the carapace. The ion shields of these knights manifest as shimmering fields of crimson energy that momentarily display screaming faces when struck by enemy fire. Most disturbing are the modifications to their Reaper chainswords, which develop teeth that regenerate when broken and exude a digestive fluid that continues to dissolve armor even after initial contact. Nurgle corrupted Questorus knights undergo more comprehensive physical transformation. The adamantium plates develop a patina that resembles advanced corrosion, but actually strengthens the material through supernatural means. Joints and articulation points begin to seep viscous fluids that should impair movement, but instead create a self-lubricating system resistant to environmental hazards. The reactor housing swells to disproportionate size, pulsing like a diseased heart as it pumps contaminated energy through the knight systems. House Festering Glory Field's Questorus knights, whose cockpits have expanded into transparent blisters, containing both pilot and a soup of nutrient fluids teeming with supernatural diseases. These knights move with deceptive slowness, their gait appearing ponderous until they suddenly accelerate with impossible speed when engaging targets. Their thermal cannons have been modified to project clouds of plague spores rather than focused heat, covering wider areas with less immediate but more persistent lethality. Zinkian corruption manifests in Questorus knights through constant, subtle reconfiguration. The armor plates shift position by millimeters each day, eventually creating formations impossible under normal physics. Weapon housings develop crystal growths that act as focusing lenses, changing the properties of energy weapons unpredictably during battle. Most significantly, the internal layout of these knights becomes non-Euclidean, with maintenance adepts reporting chambers that are larger inside than their external dimensions would allow. The Cerastus-class knights, designed for speed and close-quarters combat, develop particularly disturbing corruptions when exposed to chaos influence. Their more complex locomotion systems, already pushing the boundaries of knight technology, become gateways for warp entities to manipulate physical movement. Cerastus knights dedicated to Slaanesh demonstrate this most dramatically, their limbs bending at impossible angles, and their torso units rotating beyond mechanical tolerances to strike at enemies from unexpected vectors. House Delition's Cerastus knights exemplify Slaaneshi corruption. Their lancer weapons develop barbed protrusions that inject combat stimulants into damaged enemy systems, causing machine spirits to experience sensory overload analogous to pain. The knights move with hypnotic grace, their stride patterns creating visual illusions that disorient opponents. Most distinctive are their sonic modification packages, which transform every movement into harmonics designed to resonate with human nervous systems, inducing either paralysis or unwanted euphoria in nearby infantry. The most extreme physical corruptions manifest in the Dominus class knights, whose larger chassis and more sophisticated systems provide greater scope for warp influence. The plasma cores of these massive engines become unstable reality anchors, creating localized warp fields that distort both space and time in their immediate vicinity. Enemy weapons fire may slow to a crawl when approaching a corrupted Dominus Knight, or projectiles might phase partially into the warp before rematerializing inside enemy positions. House Malinax's Dominus-class Knights develop layered mutations that blend mechanical and organic components. Their volcano lances incorporate actual volcanic material harvested from demon worlds, projecting streams of warp-infused magma that continues to burn even in vacuum. The massive carapace develops secondary limbs that operate independently of the pilot's control, grabbing nearby infantry or manipulating objects, while the main weapon systems engage larger targets. The machine spirit of these knights fragments into multiple semi-autonomous subroutines, allowing them to process battlefield information and react with impossible speed. Beyond physical appearance, the techno-heretical modifications made to corrupted knights fundamentally alter their battlefield capabilities. Questorus-class knights dedicated to Khorne often replace standard weapon systems with forbidden technologies designed to maximize bloodshed. The iconoclast House Draconis retrofits their knights with Bloodflayer cannons, modified battle cannons that fire shells containing monofilament wires suspended in acidic solution. Upon impact, these shells burst to cover an area with nearly invisible wires that slice through armor and flesh with equal ease, creating a mist of blood that feeds warp engines embedded in the knight's reactor. Mechanicus-aligned houses that fall to chaos gain access to dark Mechanicum weapon templates purged from loyal Forge World's archives. House Draken's Questorus knights mount scrapcode howitzers that fire data shells containing corrupted machine code. These projectiles cause minimal physical damage, but infect enemy targeting systems, vehicle machine spirits, and even augmetic implants with viral scrap code that turns technology against its users. Imperial Knights hit by these weapons have been observed targeting their own allies or shutting down critical systems mid-battle. The corruption of a Knight's Throne Mechanicum creates opportunities for techno-heretical modifications that would be impossible with standard machine spirits. The ancestral memories stored within the throne, once a stabilizing influence, become a vector for spreading corruption through generations of pilots. Dark Mechanicum tech priests have developed rituals to deliberately retune these memories, creating false historical records that justify the knights' fall to chaos as necessary or predestined. House Vextrix's thrones have undergone particularly disturbing modifications. The neural interface components have been expanded to encompass the pilot's entire nervous system, rather than just the brain stem connections used in loyal knights. This allows the corrupted machine spirit to directly manipulate the pilot's sensory inputs, creating personalized hellscapes that keep the noble in a state of perpetual terror conducive to Nurgle worship. Pilots recovered from damaged House Vextrix knights exist in a state of physical decay that should have proven fatal, their bodies sustained by supernatural diseases that preserve consciousness while maximizing suffering. The Abominant class knight represents perhaps the most extreme example of techno-heretical modification in the Chaos Knight's arsenal. Unlike corrupted versions of standard templates, the Abominant was designed by the Dark Mechanicum specifically to channel warp energy through technology. The central feature of an Abominant is its vortex generator, a blasphemous device that creates a controlled warp rift within the knight's chassis, containing a bound demon that provides both power and malign intelligence. The nightmare technologies incorporated into the Abominant include the electrothomic conductor, mechanical tendrils that extend from the knight's frame to drain energy directly from enemy systems or living beings. This energy is channeled through the vortex generator, empowering the bound demon while simultaneously venting excess warp energy as destructive blasts from the knight's primary weapon. The entire system creates a self-sustaining loop of harvested energy and destructive output that violates fundamental laws of thermodynamics. House Korax abominants incorporate additional heretical technology in their cortical nodes, crystalline structures mounted at key points on the knight's frame that amplify the psychic emanations of the bound demon. These nodes project fields of focused malice that can cause unprotected humans to experience hallucinations or even spontaneous combustion. Imperial psychers have reported that these knights register in the warp not as machines, but as demonic entities wearing technological shells, their signatures nearly indistinguishable from greater demons of comparable power. War dogs, the smaller knight variants, undergo particularly efficient corruption due to their less complex machine spirits. Dark Mechanicum engineers prize corrupted war dogs as test beds for experimental technologies too unstable for larger knight chassis. House Lucaris war dogs mount fleshmelter projectors that break down the molecular bonds of organic material while leaving armor intact, creating the disturbing spectacle of perfectly preserved tanks and vehicles filled with liquefied crew. The war dogs of House Morbidia demonstrate how corruption can enhance rather than degrade precision. Their targeting systems have been modified with warp-sensitive auger, arrays that detect not just physical bodies, but the souls within them. These knights can track targets through solid obstacles by following their warp signature, and their weapons are calibrated to cause maximum pain rather than immediate death. House Morbidia war dogs typically operate in packs of 3, using their supernatural senses to herd enemies into killing zones where larger knights wait. The most fundamental techno-heresy in Chaos Knight construction is the deliberate fusion of demonic entities with the machine spirit of the knight suit. Unlike possession, which involves a demon overwhelming an existing machine spirit, this fusion creates a hybrid consciousness that retains the technical knowledge and battlefield experience of the knight while incorporating the supernatural abilities of the warp entity. This process, known to the Dark Mechanicum as animus amalgamation, requires rare materials and elaborate rituals, but produces war machines with capabilities far beyond their loyal counterparts. The iconoclast House Herpetrax has perfected a variant of this process that preserves portions of the original noble's consciousness alongside the demonic entity and machine spirit. Their knights contain 3-part minds with the tactical acumen of experienced human pilots, the technical efficiency of machine spirits, and the reality-warping powers of bound demons. These composite intelligences can process battlefield information with supernatural speed while simultaneously casting warp-influenced effects on nearby reality. The physical manifestation of this demonic fusion varies based on the specific entity bound to the knight. Cornate demons typically manifest through the knight's weapon systems, causing close combat arms to develop mouth-like openings that roar with the demon's voice and consume the blood of slain enemies. Tzynkian entities emerge through sensor arrays, replacing standard auger systems with warp-attuned crystalline structures that perceive probability streams rather than physical reality. Nurgle demons infuse the knight's internal atmosphere regulation systems, filling the pilot chamber with supernatural diseases that transform the noble into a host for the demon's consciousness. Perhaps most disturbing are the knights bound with demons of Slaanesh, where the fusion occurs primarily through the neural interface of the Throne Mechanicum. These knights develop enhanced sensory apparatus that feeds stimuli directly to both pilot and demon simultaneously, creating a feedback loop of sensation that drives both entities into states of combat ecstasy. The machine components of these knights develop synesthetic properties, with weapon systems that translate enemy deaths into musical tones or armor plates that change color in response to the pilot's emotional state. The Forge world of Zana 2 has developed specialized binding rituals for each class of knight, tailoring the demonic fusion to enhance the war machine's intended battlefield role. Questorus-class knights receive demons chosen for their martial prowess, creating engines focused on direct combat. Dominus-class knights are bound with entities selected for strategic intelligence, enhancing their command capabilities. War dogs undergo mass binding rituals, where lesser demons are fused with multiple chassis simultaneously, creating packs with shared consciousness that can coordinate with supernatural precision. The most advanced form of demonic fusion occurs in the Tyrant-class Chaos Knights, where greater demons are bound into specially prepared chassis. These massive war machines serve as physical anchors for entities that would normally require constant sacrifice or warp energy to maintain their presence in real space. The Knight systems provide a stable platform that allows the greater demon to project its power without the limitations normally imposed by material reality. House Korek's infamous tyrant Soulrender contains a bound bloodthirster whose presence is so powerful that reality visibly distorts around the Knight, with surfaces melting and reforming as it passes. The long-term consequences of these blasphemous fusions extend beyond immediate battlefield threats. Each successfully bound Chaos Knight creates a mobile weak point in the barrier between real space and the warp. Imperial Psychers report that areas where these Knights have operated show increased warp storm activity and higher rates of possession among the local population for decades afterward. The Ordo Malleus maintains specialized containment protocols for battlefields where Chaos Knights have been destroyed, as the banished demonic entities often attempt to return to the material realm through the residual connection established by their former mechanical hosts. The path to damnation for a Knight pilot begins not with the thunderous roar of battle, but with the quiet corruption of sacred tradition. The becoming ceremony, once a solemn rite of passage marking a noble's ascension to Knight pilot, serves as the perfect vehicle for chaos corruption, where loyal houses conduct this ritual with reverence, emphasizing duty and honor. The fallen houses transform it into something altogether more sinister. House Korek's perverted becoming ceremony takes place within a chamber lined with the flayed skin of previous pilots deemed unworthy. The young noble approaches the throne mechanicum, not in ceremonial robes, but naked, their body covered in fresh wounds carved by house elders. The blood flowing from these ritualistic cuts serves as the medium through which Khorne's influence enters both pilot and machine. As the noble sits upon the throne, attendant Dark Mechanicum tech priests activate neural interface spikes that plunge deeper than those used by loyal houses, penetrating not just the brain stem, but the amygdala and frontal lobes, areas governing emotion and moral reasoning. The pain of this invasive connection triggers a survival response that Khorne's influence transforms into rage. While a loyal throne mechanicum would filter and structure this response, the corrupted version amplifies it, creating a feedback loop of fury and aggression. The ancestral memories accessed during this corrupted becoming focus exclusively on moments of violence and triumph, edited to emphasize the exhilaration of killing rather than the duty of protection. Many candidates die during this process, their bodies rejecting the unnatural connection or their minds shattering under the psychological assault. Those who survive emerge fundamentally changed, experiencing reality through a lens of perpetual rage, barely contained by their remaining humanity. House Morbidia's becoming ritual takes a different approach, emphasizing Nurgle's aspects of endurance and inevitable decay. Their candidates are first infected with 7 carefully engineered diseases, each targeting different bodily systems. For 3 weeks, the noble suffers in isolation, their body breaking down while Dark Mechanicum biologist specialists monitor their deterioration. Only when the candidate reaches the precise threshold between life and death, when their organic systems have failed but consciousness somehow remains, are they brought before the waiting throne. The corrupted throne mechanicum of House Morbidia features additional components not found in loyal Knights: nutrient vats containing putrid fluids, respiratory interfaces designed to cycle diseased air through the pilot's lungs, and injection systems that continuously introduce new pathogens into the noble's bloodstream. The neural interface establishes connection not just with the brain but with the diseases themselves, which have become symbiotic organisms sharing the pilot's consciousness. The ancestral memories experienced by Morbidia pilots come filtered through generations of disease-induced hallucinations, creating a distorted lineage where suffering is celebrated as enlightenment. The most insidious aspect of these corrupted becoming rituals is how they pervert the core purpose of the throne mechanicum. In loyal Knights, the throne serves to temper the pilot's impulses with ancestral wisdom and maintain psychological stability during the stress of combat. In Chaos Knights, this stabilizing influence becomes a conduit for corruption, using the nobles' respect for tradition and lineage to normalize atrocity. Each generation of pilots adds their own tainted experiences to the throne's memory, creating an accelerating cycle of corruption that pushes each new pilot further from humanity than the last. The Dreadbond ritual represents the next evolution of corruption beyond the perverted becoming ceremony. While all Knight pilots form bonds with their machines, the Dreadbond creates a tripartite connection between noble, Knight, and demonic entity. This unholy union goes beyond mere possession or influence, creating a composite being with aspects of all three components. House Lucaris performs the Dreadbond in a chamber constructed from the melted-down armor of defeated Loyalist Knights, the metal reforged into surfaces inscribed with shifting mathematical formulas pleasing to Tzeentch. The candidate, having already undergone the corrupted becoming, is surgically modified by Dark Mechanicum Biologists specialists. Their nervous system is extended through mechanical interfaces that will eventually connect to specific points within the Knight chassis, while portions of their brain are removed to create space for crystalline structures that will house fragments of demonic consciousness. The Knight itself undergoes similar preparation, its machine's spirit deliberately fragmented through scrap code injection and targeted electromagnetic pulses. This controlled damage creates gaps in the machine's consciousness, voids that hunger to be filled. The demonic entity, typically bound within a specially prepared crystal or mechanical component, is introduced to the chamber last. Unlike crude summoning rituals that simply call a demon into real space, the Dreadbond requires a carefully prepared vessel that contains the entity in a state between materialization and warp existence. When all components are present, Dark Mechanicum tech priests activate ancient devices that generate overlapping fields of warp energy. These fields destabilize the boundaries between the three participants, allowing aspects of each to flow into the others. The noble experiences memories belonging to both the Knight's machine spirit and the demonic entity. The Knight systems incorporate biological components harvested from the noble and warp-attuned materials from the demon. The demon gains anchors in both the mechanical systems of the Knight and the organic brain of the noble, allowing it to exist in real space without the constant expenditure of energy typically required for materialization. The result of this ritual is a war machine that defies conventional classification. The pilot retains human intelligence and tactical acumen, but gains access to the demon's supernatural perceptions. The Knight maintains its mechanical precision, but can temporarily ignore physical laws when advantageous. The demon secures a permanent foothold in real space while gaining the protection of adamantium armor and void shields. This composite entity represents one of the most dangerous weapons in the Chaos arsenal, a war machine combining human creativity, mechanical reliability, and demonic power. House Korak's variation of the Dreadbond focuses on combat enhancement, binding cornate demons specifically selected for their martial prowess. Their ritual involves drenching the Knight chassis in the blood of exactly 808 worthy opponents, creating a supernatural patina that attracts blood-seeking demons. The noble pilot undergoes surgical modification to replace their heart with a mechanical pump that circulates blood through external tubes connecting directly to the Knight's control systems. During the Dreadbond ritual, these tubes are temporarily connected to the prepared demonic vessel, allowing the entity to taste the noble's essence before the final binding. The Dark Mechanicum plays a crucial role in maintaining Chaos Knights, their techno-heretical expertise necessary for both the initial corruption and ongoing functionality of these abominations. Unlike the tech priests of Mars who approach machinery with religious reverence, Dark Mechanicum adepts view technology as a medium for expressing Chaos's transformative power. They approach the maintenance of Chaos Knights not as preservation, but as continuous evolution, each repair or modification an opportunity to incorporate new corruptions. Magos Dracovac, whose treatise on the optimization of animus-infused locomotors remains a foundational text for Dark Mechanicum Knight specialists, established the principle of mechanical malleability. the concept that exposure to warp energies renders adamantium and ceramite temporarily plastic, allowing for modifications impossible under normal physical laws. His workshops on the demon world of Temporia developed techniques for reshaping knight components while they remained installed and operational, molding armor plates and weapon housings like clay, while the demon-infused machine spirit adapted to these changes in real time. The maintenance rituals performed by Dark Mechanicum adepts bear little resemblance to the careful procedures of loyal sacristans. Where Imperial maintenance involves precise calibration and component replacement, Chaos Knight maintenance incorporates blood sacrifice, incantations in forbidden languages, and the binding of minor warp entities into subsystems. A simple weapon alignment might require the sacrifice of 8 captives, their souls drawn into the targeting matrix to enhance its accuracy. Hydraulic fluid is routinely mixed with the blood of specific creatures chosen for symbolic value: orc blood for strength, Eldari blood for speed, human blood for adaptability. The tools used by these corrupted tech priests combine conventional technology with warp-attuned components. Mechadendrites tipped with living tissue allow the tech priest to directly interface with both mechanical systems and the bound demons within. Diagnostic cogitators incorporate crystal matrices that translate demonic whispers into technical data. Most disturbing are the animate instruments, tools created by binding minor demons into mechanical forms, creating sentient wrenches and screwdrivers that can anticipate the tech priest's needs and access spaces too small for conventional tools. House Draghaste maintains a particularly close relationship with the Dark Mechanicum Forge world of Zana 2, where specialized facilities exist solely for the maintenance and enhancement of their knights. These corruption docks feature rendering chambers where new components are bathed in chemical compounds derived from human suffering, imprinting them with emotional resonances that make them more attractive to demonic entities. Adjacent to these are binding theaters, where minor demons are installed into secondary systems like auto senses and targeting arrays, each bound through rituals specific to its function. The forbidden texts used to enhance knight capabilities through chaos represent some of the most dangerous knowledge in the galaxy. The Codex Mechanica Obscura, compiled by the Hirtek Magos Vathek during his 1,000-year exile in the Eye of Terror, contains detailed schematics for modifying every known pattern of Imperial Knight to better channel warp energies. Its 18 volumes include such forbidden knowledge as the construction of soul engines, power plants that consume human spirits as fuel, and perception matrices, sensory systems that allow pilots to see into the warp while operating in real space. The 13th Revelation of Gargachaloth, a text allegedly dictated by a Lord of Change to the Dark Mechanicum adept Hephaestus, focuses specifically on enhancing a knight's weapon systems through chaos influence. It details rituals for binding specific types of demons to different weapons, Cornate entities for close combat weapons, Zinkian demons for energy projectors, Nurgle's servants for chemical and biological weapons, and Slaneshi entities for sonic armaments. The text includes precise measurements for the sigils that must be carved into each weapon component and the specific sacrifices required to attract the appropriate entity. Perhaps most dangerous is the Throne Mechanicum Transfiguration Manual, a practical guide to corrupting the sacred bond between noble and knight. This text, written in a dispassionate technical style belying its heretical content, provides step-by-step instructions for modifying a throne's neural interfaces to bypass the pilot's moral reasoning and enhance emotional extremes. It includes detailed anatomical diagrams showing exactly where to place additional neural spikes to access different brain regions, with specific modifications recommended depending on which chaos god the knight will serve. These texts circulate among Dark Mechanicum enclaves and Chaos Knight houses in fragmentary form, with complete copies jealously guarded by the most powerful Hirteks. The Inquisition maintains a standing order to destroy these works wherever found, considering the knowledge within too dangerous to preserve even in sealed archives. Despite these efforts, the techniques described continue to spread, with new variations and enhancements developed as Chaos Knights encounter new technologies to corrupt and incorporate. The application of this forbidden knowledge transforms standard knight patterns into uniquely horrifying weapons. House Korax Knights incorporate bloodthirst actuators in their limb joints, hydraulic systems that become more efficient as they absorb blood through specialized collection ports. These components allow their knights to achieve brief bursts of speed impossible for their loyalist counterparts, charging across battlefields with supernatural swiftness when sufficiently fed with fresh blood. House Lucaris Knights feature flux field generators derived from designs in the Codex Mechanica Obscura, creating localized reality distortions that cause enemy targeting systems to perceive the knight in multiple locations simultaneously. These devices draw power directly from the bound Tzynkian demon within the knight, creating a symbiotic relationship where the demon's reality warping abilities are enhanced and focused through mechanical means. The most feared of all Chaos Knights are those who have not only fallen to darkness, but have risen to terrible prominence within it. These Dreadblade champions stand apart even from their corrupted kin, their names spoken in hushed tones by Imperial commanders, and celebrated in blood-soaked rituals by cultists across the galaxy. Unlike the knights of established iconoclast or infernal houses, these solo agents of destruction forge their own dark legends, each atrocity adding to their terrible reputation. The knight known as Scabiathrax's Chosen exemplifies the horrifying potential of a Dreadblade champion fully embraced by the ruinous powers. Once Sir Malcolm Darius of House Krast, this knight paladin defended Imperial worlds for over 3 decades before exposure to a particularly virulent strain of Nurgle's rot during the Dregmire campaign. The disease, engineered by the Great Unclean One Scabiathrax specifically to target knight pilots, infected not just Darius but the filtration systems of his throne Mechanicum. As the pilot slowly succumbed to the plague, the knight's machine spirit absorbed the corruption, creating a sympathetic bond with the disease entity. When Mechanicus tech priests attempted to purge the infection from both pilot and machine, they inadvertently triggered a catastrophic transformation. The knight's systems, now aligned with Nurgle's entropic energies, rejected the purification protocols and instead accelerated the corruption. Within minutes, the repair bay became a charnel house as Darius's knight unleashed clouds of disease spores that liquefied flesh on contact. The fully corrupted Dreadblade tore free from its maintenance cradle, its once gleaming armor now bloated and seeping with unnatural fluids. Today, Scabiathrax's Chosen appears as a grotesque parody of a knight paladin. Its reactor housing has swollen to 3 times normal size, pulsing visibly beneath corroded armor plates that somehow remain functional despite advanced decay. The cockpit has transformed into a transparent sack containing Darius himself, his body split open from sternum to pelvis to reveal internal organs teeming with supernatural parasites. These organisms extend throughout the knight's systems, replacing conventional mechanical components with living tissue that regenerates damage almost instantly. The weapon systems of this abomination have evolved to spread Nurgle's gifts across the battlefield. Its Reaper chainsword, now fused directly to the knight's arm without joints or connection points, secretes acidic compounds that cause wounds which never heal. Most feared is its plague cannon, a biological weapon that replaced the standard rapid-fire battle cannon. This organ-like protrusion launches globs of supernatural phlegm containing hundreds of disease variants, each engineered to affect different targets from infantry to vehicle machine spirits. Scabiathrax's Chosen has developed a unique battlefield capability that makes it particularly dangerous to Imperial Knight formations. The parasites within its systems can temporarily detach and infiltrate enemy knights through damaged armor, corrupting subsystems and feeding targeting data back to their parent organism. Knights fighting alongside this Dreadblade often report phantom readings and targeting glitches minutes before discovering their own systems have been compromised. The Dreadblade, known as Hatred's Scorn, represents a different path to champion status. Originally Lady Eliza Ferris of House Tyrannes, this knight pilot witnessed her entire household slaughtered by Dark Eldar raiders who attacked during a sacred ceremony when most knights were powered down. Ferris alone managed to reach her knight errant and drive off the attackers, but not before watching her family subjected to unspeakable tortures. The trauma of this event created a psychic wound that attracted the attention of Slaanesh. As Ferris hunted the Dark Eldar responsible across multiple systems, her obsession with vengeance gradually transformed into a fixation on the artistry of their torture techniques. Her knight's machine spirit, calibrated to her emotional state, began incorporating these observations into its combat protocols. Within 2 years, Ferris had modified her knight's melta-weapon to deliver precisely modulated energy pulses that maximized pain rather than damage, while her chainsword was rebuilt with variable speed teeth designed to create specific wound patterns. Hatred's Scorn now appears as a disturbing fusion of Imperial Knight technology and Dark Eldar aesthetic. Its armor plates have been carved into flowing patterns that seem to move when viewed peripherally, creating disorienting visual effects that trigger vertigo in observers. The cockpit contains not just the throne mechanicum, but an array of sensory amplifiers that allow Ferris to experience every kill with supernatural intensity. Most distinctive are the trophy racks mounted on the carapace, displaying the preserved nervous systems of worthy opponents, somehow kept alive and conscious through forbidden technologies. The weapon systems of Hatred's Scorn reflect its pilot's evolution from vengeful noble to artist of agony. Its primary armament, designated the Ecstasy Engine in intercepted communications, appears as a conventional thermal spear until deployed. When activated, the weapon unfolds into a complex array of energy projectors calibrated to stimulate pain receptors while cauterizing wounds to prevent death. The Knight's close combat weapon incorporates sonic emitters that match the frequency of specific bone structures, causing them to shatter in patterns that Ferris considers aesthetically pleasing. The most dangerous aspect of this Dreadblade is its ability to temporarily override the sensory inputs of nearby Imperial Knights. Through a combination of Dark Eldar technology and Slaaneshi warpcraft, Hatred's Scorn can project false sensory data directly into enemy thrones mechanicum, causing loyal pilots to experience momentary but debilitating hallucinations. These precision strikes against perception itself have allowed the Dreadblade to defeat knights from houses Raven, Terran, and even Krast without sustaining significant damage. The Dreadblade champion, known as the Obsidian King, commands respect even among Chaos Space Marine warbands, its power and tactical acumen earning it a place of honor in major Chaos offensives. Once a Knight Crusader of House Morton, this war engine's fall began during the 13th Black Crusade, when it was deployed to defend the Cadian Gate. After witnessing the destruction of Cadia and the birth of the Great Rift, the Knight's pilot, Lord Sebastus Morton, experienced a crisis of faith that left him vulnerable to Chaos influence. Unlike many fallen knights, the Obsidian King's corruption manifested not as physical mutation, but as tactical evolution. The Knight retained its original appearance with one significant exception. Its heraldry and markings constantly shift between different configurations, making it impossible to track consistently through battlefield-picked captures. This chameleonic ability extends to its energy signature, with its reactor output modulating to mimic different Knight patterns depending on tactical requirements. The Obsidian King's most feared weapons are not physical but strategic. Its machine spirit has developed the ability to intercept and decode Imperial tactical communications, while its augur arrays can identify weaknesses in enemy formations with preternatural accuracy. These capabilities, combined with Lord Morton's 4 centuries of combat experience, make the Obsidian King a battlefield commander of extraordinary effectiveness. Chaos forces following its direction operate with uncharacteristic discipline and coordination, executing complex maneuvers that maximize the impact of their typically disorganized attacks. The trophies adorning the Obsidian King reflect its strategic focus. Rather than displaying the bodies of defeated opponents, this Dreadblade collects command and control equipment, Vox arrays, tactical cogitators, and officers' signet rings. Each trophy is wired into the Knight's systems, allowing it to access fragments of machine spirit and memory that enhance its understanding of Imperial tactics. Most valuable among these trophies is a partial tactical auto-reliquary of Tiberius, a battlefield analysis device recovered from a destroyed Ultramarines command post that contains fragments of Robute Guilliman's tactical doctrines. The Crimson Reaver stands among the most active Dreadblade champions in the Imperium Nihilus, its bloody campaigns leaving dozens of worlds depopulated in the region known as the Adrantes Nebula. This Knight Rampager began as a loyalist Knight Gallant from House Griffith, transformed during a warp storm that engulfed its transport ship during transit. When the vessel emerged into real space months later, the Knight had undergone a complete metamorphosis, its systems reconfigured around a singular purpose: harvesting blood for Khorne. The Crimson Reaver's appearance evokes primal terror even in veteran Imperial troops. Its armor plates have fused with brass that pulses like arterial walls, while the joints and hydraulics have been replaced with muscle-like tissue that gives its movements an organic fluidity impossible for conventional knights. The cockpit has transformed into an open throne where the former pilot, now little more than a torso and head fused to control interfaces, screams continuous praise to Khorne as the Knight rampages across battlefields. This Dreadblade's weapons exemplify Khorne's approach to warfare: direct, brutal, and personally engaged. Its primary armament consists of twin Reaper chainfists that have developed teeth resembling actual fangs, each capable of independent movement to grip and tear apart armored targets. These weapons contain specialized collection systems that harvest blood from victims and channel it directly to the Knight's reactor, creating a self-sustaining cycle where each kill literally fuels the next attack. The more the Crimson Reaver kills, the faster and stronger it becomes, leading to an exponential increase in destruction as battles progress. The personal vendetta driving the Crimson Reaver focuses on its parent house. For reasons known only to its corrupted pilot, this Dreadblade specifically targets Knights of House Griffith, tracking their deployments across multiple sectors. When engaging its former brethren, the Crimson Reaver broadcasts on house frequencies, transmitting garbled messages that combine battle cant with cornate prayers. Imperial psychers who have analyzed these transmissions believe they contain fragments of the pilot's original personality, suggesting some remnant of the loyal knight remains trapped within the corrupted machine, aware of its actions but unable to stop them. The Dreadblade, known as Voidscream, represents perhaps the most technically sophisticated of Chaos Knight champions, its systems incorporating technologies beyond current Imperial understanding. Once a Knight Castellan of House Raven, this massive war engine disappeared during void operations against a Space Hulk designated Harbinger of Despair. When it returned 3 standard years later, the Knight had been fundamentally transformed through contact with unknown Xenos technology infused with Tzynkian warp energy. Voidscream's appearance defies conventional description, as its form seems to exist partially in dimensions beyond normal human perception. Observers report seeing different configurations simultaneously, with weapons and limbs occupying multiple positions at once. The armor plating incorporates crystalline structures that bend light around the Knight, creating distortion fields that make accurate targeting nearly impossible. Most disturbing is the cockpit area, which appears as a swirling vortex of energy-containing mathematical equations that continuously rewrite themselves in patterns painful to observe directly. The weapon systems employed by this Dreadblade demonstrate its technological superiority over conventional knights. Its Volcano Lance has been modified to fire projectiles that exist simultaneously as energy beams and solid matter, bypassing void shields entirely by approaching from angles impossible in 3-dimensional space. The Siegebreaker cannons now fire chronometric shells that temporarily accelerate or decelerate time in their impact zone, causing enemy systems to fall out of sync with their operators or ammunition to detonate before being fired. Voidscream maintains a collection of technological relics harvested from defeated opponents, with a particular focus on targeting and defense systems. After each engagement, the Dreadblade systematically dismantles disabled enemy knights, extracting specific components that are then incorporated into its own systems through a process Imperial tech priests have termed technological assimilation. Each absorbed component adds to the knight's capabilities, while further corrupting its machine spirit, creating an ever-evolving war engine that becomes more powerful with each victory. The personal quest driving Voidscream appears connected to the Space Hulk where its transformation occurred. Intercepted communications and battle patterns suggest the Dreadblade is searching for specific technological artifacts scattered across Imperial space, each somehow related to the Harbinger of Despair. Ordo Xeno's investigations into this Space Hulk remain classified at the highest levels, but rumors persist of non-human technology dating from before the Age of Strife that could potentially alter the fundamental laws of physics when assembled correctly. The social structures that develop within Renegade Knight houses represent dark reflections of their former noble traditions, warped by chaos influence into something far more sinister. Where loyal houses maintain feudal hierarchies based on concepts of honor and duty, fallen houses develop systems built upon dominance, supernatural favor, and ritualized violence. These perverted social orders vary significantly between houses depending on their patron deity and the circumstances of their fall, but all share a fundamental rejection of imperial values while ironically preserving many of the forms and ceremonies that define their pre-corruption existence. House Draken, dedicated to Khorne, maintains perhaps the most straightforward hierarchical system among Chaos Knight houses. Leadership belongs to whichever knight has claimed the most significant kills in recent battles, with formal challenges issued regularly to determine supremacy. The house's fortress monastery has been transformed into a massive gladiatorial arena where knights duel for position while lesser household members, technical support staff, servants, and aspirant pilots observe from tiered seating carved from the bones of defeated enemies. These contests rarely result in the destruction of valuable knight suits, but frequently claim the lives of pilots, creating a constant demand for new candidates to bond with the corrupted thrones. The succession rituals of House Draken focus entirely on combat prowess, with aspiring pilots training from childhood in purpose-built killing chambers where they face progressively more dangerous opponents. By the time candidates reach the age for throne bonding, typically between 13 and 15 standard years, they have personally killed dozens of opponents in hand-to-hand combat. The final trial requires them to defeat the previous pilot of their assigned knight in single combat, consuming the heart of their predecessor before taking control of the war machine. This ensures that each generation of pilots exceeds the martial capabilities of the last, creating a continuous evolution toward more effective killing. House Morbidia, aligned with Nurgle, structures its hierarchy according to the progression of disease and decay. Leadership belongs to the Grandfathers Chosen, the pilot whose body hosts the most advanced and complex diseases while still maintaining enough function to operate a knight. The ruling council consists of 7 knights known as the Septic Brotherhood, each responsible for developing and testing new plagues to spread across Imperial worlds. Position within this council depends not on personal power, but on the effectiveness of a pilot's created diseases, with special honor given to those who engineer plagues capable of infecting both organic beings and machine spirits. Succession within House Morbidia occurs through a process called the inheritance, where aspiring pilots deliberately expose themselves to diseases harvested from dying knights. Candidates are sealed within plague chambers containing the bodily fluids and corrupted components of expired pilots, left to marinate in contagion for 7 days and 7 nights. Those who survive emerge permanently transformed, their bodies hosting dozens of supernatural diseases in a state of carefully maintained equilibrium. The final step requires them to consume a portion of the previous pilot's infected flesh, allowing the diseases themselves to recognize the new host as legitimate. The technical support structure of fallen houses often preserves more of its original form than the knightly hierarchy itself, as the practical requirements of maintaining knight suits necessitate some degree of specialized knowledge and organization. House Korak maintains a core of dark mechanicum adepts known as the Blood Mechanics, former sacristans whose technical knowledge has been supplemented with cornate blood rituals. These specialists occupy a precarious position in the house hierarchy, essential for keeping the knights operational but viewed with suspicion for their intellectual approach to warfare, which conflicts with Khorne's emphasis on direct combat. To survive in this environment, the blood mechanics have developed their own internal hierarchy based on ritualized dueling, similar to that of the knights they serve. Each technical advancement or repair technique must be proven in combat against rival adepts, with successful innovations demonstrated through the destruction of the challenger's enemies. This creates a technical core that approaches mechanical problems from a perspective of weaponization, developing maintenance techniques specifically to enhance lethality rather than reliability or efficiency. The most successful blood mechanics eventually undergo their own version of the becoming ritual, their bodies enhanced with cybernetic weapons that allow them to participate directly in combat while maintaining their technical functions. House Lucaris, dedicated to Tzeentch, has developed perhaps the most complex social hierarchy among Chaos Knight houses. Leadership ostensibly belongs to the Sovereign of Flux, a position that changes hands according to an incomprehensible system of omens, prophecies, and arcane calculations. In practice, the house operates through a labyrinthine network of conspiracies and counter-conspiracies, with true power residing with those knights who can manipulate events from the shadows. Formal rank means little compared to one's position within the constantly shifting web of alliances and betrayals that defines house politics. Succession within House Lucaris occurs through a process called the Unmaking, where aspirant pilots must first destroy their predecessor's identity before claiming their knight. This begins with a campaign of psychological warfare against the targeted knight pilot, using sorcery, manipulation, and targeted character assassination to break down their sense of self. Once the target has been sufficiently destabilized, the aspirant performs a ritual that transfers fragments of the victim's memories and personality into themselves, while leaving the original pilot an empty shell. The hollowed-out pilot is then installed as a secondary consciousness within the knight's throne mechanicum, their identity subsumed, but their experience and tactical knowledge preserved for the new pilot to access. The relationship between fallen knight houses and other chaos forces exists in a state of perpetual tension, with alliances forming and dissolving based on immediate advantage rather than shared long-term goals. Unlike Chaos Space Marines, who typically organize around ideological or Primarch-based loyalties, Chaos Knights retain much of their feudal perspective, viewing themselves as aristocracy even in damnation. This creates natural friction when they encounter Chaos Lords or Demon Princes who expect subservience rather than alliance. House Korak's interactions with World Eater's warbands exemplify this complicated relationship. Both serve Khorne through direct combat and bloodshed, creating natural battlefield synergy, but conflicts regularly erupt over questions of status and command authority. House Korak Knights refuse to accept orders from anyone they haven't personally witnessed in combat, requiring World Eater's champions to prove themselves worthy of respect through ritual duels against House champions. These contests typically conclude before either participant is destroyed. Valuable assets are not lightly wasted, but they establish a clear dominance hierarchy that remains in effect for the duration of a specific campaign. The practical benefits of these uneasy alliances become apparent during major offensives, where knights provide heavy weapons platforms, while Chaos Space Marines offer tactical flexibility. During the Vraxian campaign, House Draken Knights operated alongside Death Guard forces in the toxic Southern Hemisphere, their corrupted life support systems allowing them to function in environments that would have incapacitated conventional forces. The Death Guard provided infantry screens that prevented enemy sappers from approaching the knights with Melta charges, while the knights eliminated hardened bunkers that would have required costly infantry assaults. The relationship between Chaos Knights and cultist forces differs significantly from their interactions with Chaos Space Marines. Where fallen Astartes are viewed as equals or rivals, cultists are seen as disposable resources, not fundamentally different from the peasantry that served knight houses before their fall. House Morbidia maintains extensive cultist breeding programs on its plague worlds, raising generations of humans specifically to serve as test subjects for new diseases and as maintenance crews for their knights. These cultists are genetically engineered for specific purposes, some developed with enhanced immune systems to serve as disease incubators, others with modified nervous systems that allow them to interface directly with corrupted machinery. The most valued cultists within fallen houses are those with technical knowledge, particularly former sacristans or mechanicus adepts who bring understanding of knight systems. House Vextrix maintains a specialized order called the Plague Mechanics, who occupy a position above ordinary cultists but below true knights. These technically skilled servants undergo partial corruption, their bodies modified with disease-incubating implants that connect them to the house's favored plagues, while preserving enough cognitive function to perform complex repairs. The most successful plague mechanics may eventually receive the reward of full infection, their bodies becoming incubation chambers for new disease strains, while their consciousness is preserved within the corrupted machine spirits of the knights they once maintained. Territorial conflicts between rival renegade houses occur frequently, particularly in the contested regions surrounding the Eye of Terror and the Maelstrom. Unlike loyal houses, which typically respect established boundaries and resolve disputes through formal channels, Chaos Knights engage in opportunistic expansion whenever possible. These conflicts rarely result in the complete destruction of either house, as the scarcity of knight suits and throne mechanicums makes preservation of these assets a priority even amid the most bitter rivalries. The centuries-long conflict between House Korak and House Mephitica in the Scourge Stars region demonstrates how these territorial disputes operate. Both houses claim dominion over the demon world of Anathrax, with its vast Prometheum reserves and strategic position near stable warp routes. Rather than committing their full strength to a potentially devastating direct confrontation, they engage in calculated raids and proxy conflicts, using cultist armies and allied Chaos Space Marine warbands to weaken their opponent while preserving their irreplaceable knight assets. When direct knight-to-knight combat does occur, it takes on ritual significance beyond simple military engagement. House Korak and House Mephitica have developed a formalized system of challenges where individual knights meet at designated locations to settle specific territorial claims. These duels follow strict protocols regarding weapons, support forces, and victory conditions, with both houses honoring the outcomes despite their otherwise chaotic nature. This seemingly contradictory adherence to formal codes within otherwise anarchic organizations reflects the persistent influence of knightly traditions even within fully corrupted houses. Dark alliances between renegade houses typically form around shared patrons or complementary capabilities rather than genuine trust or common purpose. House Draken and House Lucaris maintain a long-standing arrangement despite serving different chaos gods, with Draken's Cornate Knights providing direct assault capabilities, while Lucaris's Tzynkian Knights offer sorceress support and strategic intelligence. This alliance operates through a system of mutual debts and obligations, with each house tracking what they are owed for their contributions to shared campaigns. When these debts fall too far out of balance, violent renegotiations occur to establish a new equilibrium. Perhaps the most dangerous form of dark alliance emerges when multiple Chaos Knight houses unite behind a single demon prince or particularly powerful Chaos Lord. The coalition known as the Charnel Court represents the most significant example in recent Imperial history, bringing together elements from 7 different renegade houses under the leadership of the demon prince Vathek the Hungering. This alliance formed specifically to target knight worlds along the borders of the Imperium Nihilus, with each participating house assigned specific roles based on their patron deity's attributes and their knight's capabilities. House Korak provided the main assault elements, their Cornate Knights serving as the primary line breakers in major engagements. House Lucaris contributed strategic intelligence and sorceress support, their Tzynkian Knights using warp-enhanced augur arrays to identify weaknesses in enemy defenses. House Morbidia deployed specialized plague vectors in advance of main forces, their Nurgle corrupted knights releasing engineered diseases that weakened both defenders and civilian populations before the primary assault. House Delition, dedicated to Slaanesh, focused on psychological warfare, their knights broadcasting sonic weapons that induced panic and confusion among enemy forces. The internal dynamics of the charnel court reflected the complex hierarchies that developed between chaos forces of different origins. Vathek maintained control through a combination of personal power. Few knights could stand against a fully manifested demon prince in direct combat, and careful management of inter-house rivalries. By ensuring that each house received appropriate recognition and spoils for their contributions, while simultaneously preventing any single house from gaining enough power to challenge his authority, Vathek created a surprisingly stable power structure within an inherently unstable coalition. The dark rituals that bind these alliances often involve symbolic exchanges of components between knights of different houses. Knights participating in the charnel court underwent a ceremony called the Communion of Iron, where each contributed a piece of their armor to be melted down and reforged into tokens worn by all participants. These tokens contained warp-infused material from each knight, creating sympathetic connections that allowed Vathek to monitor compliance and punish betrayal through sorcerous means. This practical enforcement mechanism was disguised within layers of ritual significance, presented to the knights as an honor rather than the control mechanism it actually represented. The most successful dark alliances developed specialized formations that leverage the unique capabilities of different Chaos Knight patterns. The Charnel Court's Reaper configuration combined House Korak's Knight Desecrators with House Lucaris's Knight Tyrants and House Morbidia's War Dogs to create a formation capable of engaging multiple target types simultaneously. The larger knights provided heavy firepower and served as anchors for the formation, while the more nimble war dogs operated in hunting packs that could rapidly reposition to exploit breakthroughs or counter enemy flanking attempts. These specialized formations demonstrate that despite their corruption, Chaos Knights retain the tactical sophistication of their loyal counterparts. The perverted social structures that develop within fallen houses may reject imperial values, but they preserve and even enhance the military effectiveness that makes knights such valuable assets. By combining the tactical traditions developed over millennia of warfare with the supernatural capabilities granted by Chaos patronage, Renegade Knights transform from noble defenders into engines of destruction that threaten the very civilization they once protected. The War of Slaughter began as a simple border dispute in the Nephilim sector, but quickly escalated into one of the most devastating campaigns of Chaos Knight aggression in recent Imperial history. House Lucaris, once a proud Imperial Knight household with a reputation for honorable conduct, had shown no signs of corruption before their sudden and violent turn. The first indication of their fall came when 3 knights from their household attacked an Imperial tithe collection facility without warning or apparent provocation, slaughtering not just the armed guards, but the administrative staff and civilian workers as well. Imperial authorities initially classified the incident as a rogue action by disaffected pilots, but within weeks the pattern became unmistakable. House Lucaris Knights appeared at multiple locations throughout the sector, targeting not military installations but population centers, refugee camps, and medical facilities. The choice of targets made little strategic sense until inquisitorial agents identified the pattern. Each attack occurred at locations where large numbers of people experienced intense fear or suffering, creating psychic resonances that strengthened the household's connection to Khorne. Lord Commander Vane of House Lucaris, once renowned for his tactical acumen and strict adherence to the knightly code, had transformed his household's fortress monastery into a charnel house where thousands of captives were systematically slaughtered in rituals designed to consecrate the knights to the blood god. The once pristine training grounds where young nobles had learned the arts of honorable combat now featured fighting pits, where prisoners battled for the amusement of corrupted knights, their blood collected in massive receptacles connected directly to the fortress's central keep. The Imperial response came from Knights of House Terran, deployed alongside elements of the White Scar's Space Marine chapter. The initial engagement at Hallows Plain should have favored the Loyalist forces, who held superior positions on high ground with clear firing lines across open terrain. House Lucaris Knights emerged from the tree line in standard formation, seemingly intent on a conventional frontal assault against prepared positions, a tactic so obviously flawed that the House Terran Knights hesitated, suspecting a trap. The trap, when it was sprung, came not from hidden forces, but from within the Lucaris Knights themselves. As they closed to medium range, their carapaces split open along seams that had not existed moments before, releasing clouds of atomized blood collected from their previous victims. This blood mist contained warp-infused compounds that temporarily overloaded the sensory systems of Loyalist Knights, creating a critical window of vulnerability. The Lucaris Knights covered the remaining distance in a bounding charge that seemed to defy the weight of their massive frames, falling upon the disoriented defenders with weapons that had transformed from standard armaments into demonic appendages wreathed in brass and crimson. House Terran lost 7 knights in the first 3 minutes of close-quarters combat, their pilots experiencing not just physical damage to their machines, but direct psychic assaults through their thrown mechanicums. The White Scars recognized the nature of the threat and deployed their librarians to counter the warp effects, establishing null field perimeters that allowed the remaining Loyalist Knights to recover their sensory functions. The battle stabilized into a grinding engagement where the Loyalists' superior numbers gradually overcame the supernatural advantages of the corrupted Knights. The aftermath revealed the full extent of House Lucaris's transformation. The captured Knights, when examined by Mechanicus tech priests, showed extensive internal modifications impossible to implement without complete dismantling and reconstruction. The reactor chambers had been reconfigured into blood furnaces that consumed organic material as fuel, while the hydraulic systems had been replaced with artificially grown muscle tissue that provided greater strength at the cost of requiring regular feeding. Most disturbing were the modifications to the thrown mechanicums, which showed evidence of deliberate damage to the components that normally filtered and structured the pilot's emotional responses. Interrogation of captured House Lucaris personnel revealed that their fall had been orchestrated by a cornate demon known as the Bloodletter Primus Gage Alathrax, who had first manifested during a routine training exercise when a young noble's anger at failure created a momentary weakness in the warp. The demon had possessed the noble, using him to corrupt Lord Commander Vane through a series of seemingly minor violations of protocol that gradually normalized increasingly extreme behavior. Once Vane turned, the rest of the household followed, with those who resisted becoming the first sacrifices in the rituals that would transform the entire house. The war of slaughter continued for 3 years as Imperial forces pursued the remaining Lucaris Knights across multiple systems. The corrupted Knights demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of Imperial response protocols, consistently appearing at locations shortly after defensive forces had been deployed elsewhere. This suggested they had access to classified Imperial communication channels, likely through corrupted machine spirits within their augur arrays that could decrypt standard Imperial transmissions. The final phase of the conflict occurred on the agri-world of Haverston, where the remaining Lucaris Knights had established a forward base within an abandoned Promethium refinery. Rather than launching another direct assault, the Knights began a systematic campaign of terror against the agricultural communities surrounding the refinery. They would emerge at night to abduct small groups of workers, leaving the mutilated remains of previous victims displayed in ritual formations that formed massive cornate symbols when viewed from orbit. The psychological impact on the local population was devastating. Productivity collapsed as workers refused to leave the relative safety of their settlement centers, creating food shortages that affected multiple systems dependent on Haverston's exports. Imperial authorities recognized that the situation represented not just a military threat, but an economic one with sector-wide implications. The response came in the form of a multi-pronged operation involving elements from the Imperial Guard, Adeptus Astartes, and Knight Houses Terran and Hawkshroud. The Battle of Haverston Refinery demonstrated the tactical evolution of Chaos Knights when fighting as a coordinated force rather than individual engines of destruction. The Lucaris Knights had modified the refinery's infrastructure to create channelized killing grounds, where their superior close combat capabilities could negate the Loyalists' numerical advantage. Prometheus pipelines had been reconfigured to spray superheated fuel across predetermined fire zones, while storage tanks were rigged as massive incendiary bombs that could be detonated remotely to isolate sections of the Imperial advance. House Hawkshroud led the initial assault, their knights advancing under cover of artillery fire from Imperial Guard basilisk batteries positioned on surrounding hillsides. The Lucaris Knights remained hidden within the refinery complex, allowing the Loyalist forces to penetrate the outer perimeter before triggering the first wave of traps. Pipelines erupted in walls of flame that engulfed two Hawkshroud Knights, the Promethium burning hot enough to compromise their void shields through sustained contact rather than direct impact. As the Loyalist advance faltered, Lucaris war dogs emerged from concealed bunkers behind the Imperial lines, targeting the artillery positions with precision strikes that suggested intimate familiarity with Imperial Guard deployment doctrines. The coordinated nature of the ambush indicated that despite their fall to Khorne, the Lucaris Knights retained sophisticated tactical capabilities rather than succumbing to the mindless berserker rage often associated with the Blood God's followers. The battle turned when Space Marines from the Salamander's chapter deployed via drop pod directly into the refinery's central control complex. Their expertise with Promethium systems allowed them to override the corrupted Knight's trap mechanisms, turning the elaborate fire control system against its masters. With their carefully prepared killing grounds neutralized, the Lucaris Knights were forced into direct engagement with superior Loyalist numbers in open terrain around the refinery's main storage facilities. Lord Commander Vane, his knight now a grotesque parody of its former glory with brass plating fused directly to adamantium and weapons that appeared more demonic than mechanical, led a final desperate charge against the Hawkshroud line. The corrupted knight's speed defied its massive bulk, covering the distance to the Loyalist formation in seconds rather than minutes. Vane targeted the Hawkshroud High King directly, recognizing that the psychological impact of killing the Loyalist commander would outweigh the tactical advantage of targeting weaker knights. The duel between Vane and High King Sorrowsworn of Hawkshroud lasted less than 30 seconds, but has been analyzed extensively by Imperial tacticians for the insights it provides into corrupted knight capabilities. Vane's knight moved with fluid grace impossible for standard Imperial patterns, its limbs bending at angles that suggested the internal structure had been completely rebuilt. The chainsword it wielded no longer featured mechanical teeth, but actual fangs that gnashed and bit independently, seeking vulnerable points in the High King's armor through what appeared to be instinct rather than targeting systems. High King Sorrowsworn prevailed through superior positioning and exploitation of the corrupted knight's overaggressive approach. By timing his iron shield pulses to deflect rather than block Vane's attacks, he created momentary openings for precision strikes against joint articulations. The fifth such strike severed hydraulic lines in the Chaos Knight's right knee assembly, creating a cascading failure that toppled the massive war engine. Sorrowsworn's finishing blow came not from his knight's weapons, but from its sheer weight, as he drove the machine's full mass onto the prone enemy's cockpit, crushing both pilot and throne mechanicum beyond recovery. With Vane's destruction, the remaining Lucaris Knights fought with increased ferocity but diminished coordination. The battle concluded with the Loyalist forces victorious, but at heavy cost, 14 knights destroyed and 23 damaged severely enough to require extensive reconstruction. The refinery complex itself was deemed unsalvageable, the Promethium reserves so thoroughly contaminated with warp energies that even after purification, they caused hallucinations and violent behavior in those exposed to their combustion byproducts. The War of Slaughter established a pattern that would be repeated in subsequent Chaos Knight campaigns, the targeting of civilian populations not for strategic advantage, but for the psychic resonance created by mass suffering, the corruption of infrastructure to create environmental hazards that could damage even heavily armored opponents, and the exploitation of Imperial response protocols to create favorable engagement conditions. These tactics represent a perversion of knightly strategic traditions, applying aristocratic military education to maximizing terror rather than achieving honorable victory. When operating alongside other Chaos forces, Renegade Knights typically assume specific battlefield roles that complement their allies' capabilities while maximizing their own strengths. During the Vraxian campaign, Knights from House Mephitica operated in support of Death Guard infantry, serving as mobile fire bases that could eliminate hardened targets, while the Plague Marines secured territory through attrition warfare. The Knights' massive firepower allowed them to reduce fortified positions from standoff range, while their corrupted Void shields provided protection from counter-battery fire that would have forced less durable units to seek cover. The tactical integration went beyond simple fire support. House Mephitica Knights had modified their ventilation systems to disperse Nurgle's rot spores across the battlefield, creating zones of supernatural contagion that weakened defenders before the Death Guard advanced into close combat range. The Knights would target environmental systems such as water purification plants and atmospheric processors, ensuring that contamination spread throughout civilian infrastructure and continued affecting the population long after the initial attack concluded. In the Cheredin sector, Renegade Knights from House Korak developed specialized siege tactics when operating alongside Iron Warriors warbands. Rather than serving as frontline assault units, these Khornate Knights operated in pairs designated as breaker teams, with one knight equipped for long-range fire support, while the other carried specialized close combat weapons designed for structural demolition. The fire support knight would target defensive weapons emplacements, creating gaps in the coverage that allowed the breaker knight to approach fortifications and apply direct force to structural weak points identified by Iron Warriors siege engineers. This methodical approach to destruction seems at odds with Khorne's preference for direct assault, but House Korak justified the tactics through results rather than process. The systematic dismantling of Imperial defenses ultimately created opportunities for greater bloodshed than would be possible through frontal attacks against prepared positions. This pragmatic adaptation of chaos principles to military reality demonstrates how Renegade Knights retain the tactical sophistication of their loyal counterparts, while directing it toward fundamentally different objectives. The Siege of Hive Andromeda during the Gothic War provides perhaps the clearest example of how Renegade Knights can overcome Imperial defenses through a combination of conventional military pressure and warp-influenced capabilities. The Hive City, located on the industrial world of Cathar, represented a critical manufacturing center for Battlefleet Gothic, producing void shield generators and targeting systems for Imperial capital ships. Its defenses included multiple layers of void shields, automated defense turrets with overlapping fields of fire, and reinforced bulkheads designed to contain breaches. House Draken committed 12 knights to the siege, including 3 Tyrant-class war engines, whose massive firepower could theoretically overwhelm even the Hive's formidable void shields through sustained bombardment. Rather than beginning with a conventional assault, however, the Chaos Knights implemented a strategy designated in Imperial records as psychic undermining. Each knight carried specialized warp-attuned devices that broadcast the psychic impressions of previous battles directly into the Hive, targeting the population's collective unconscious with visions of defeat and destruction. The systematic exposure of civilian populations to these psychic broadcasts created a ripple effect that weakened the warp boundaries within the Hive. After 3 weeks of continuous transmission, the collective fear and despair of millions created conditions that allowed House Draken's sorcerer allies to establish warp breaches inside the Void Shield perimeter. These breaches, while too unstable for large-scale troop movements, allowed specialized hunter-killer teams to infiltrate critical defensive infrastructure and disable key systems from within. The Imperial response to Renegade Knight incursions has evolved significantly since the early encounters, where conventional anti-armor tactics proved woefully inadequate against war engines enhanced by chaos energies. The Ordo Malleus maintains dedicated night hunting cadres, equipped with specialized weapons, and trained in tactics specifically designed to counter corrupted war engines. These teams typically deploy from orbit via inquisitorial vessels, bypassing outer defenses to strike directly at Chaos Knight command elements. Inquisitor Draver's Talon Squadron exemplifies this specialized approach to combating Renegade Knights. The unit consists of veteran Tempestus Scions equipped with modified multi-meltas, calibrated to target the specific energy signatures of corrupted throne mechanicums. Rather than attempting to destroy the entire Knight chassis, a task requiring firepower beyond most infantry units, these specialists focus on precision strikes against the neural interface components that connect pilot to machine. By severing this connection, they render the Knight temporarily vulnerable, while its corrupted machine spirit attempts to compensate for the loss of human direction. The Adeptus Astartes have developed their own protocols for engaging Chaos Knights, with several chapters maintaining dedicated anti-Knight specialists. The Iron Hands clan Rawcon fields Centurion assault squads equipped with siege drills modified to penetrate the reinforced cockpit armor protecting corrupted throne mechanicums. These specialists operate in conjunction with librarians who employ psychic techniques designed to temporarily disrupt the warp-enhanced capabilities of Chaos Knights, creating brief windows of vulnerability where the war engines function as merely mechanical threats rather than demonic ones. Most effective among Space Marine responses are the Grey Knights, whose combination of psychic abilities and specialized wargear makes them uniquely suited to combating warp-corrupted machinery. The Purgation squads of the Fourth Brotherhood employ sanctified Psycannon rounds that can penetrate the warp-reinforced armor of Chaos Knights, disrupting both material components and the demonic influences that enhance them. Grey Knight Techmarines have developed blessed oils and incantations that can temporarily neutralize corrupted machine spirits, allowing conventional weapons to damage systems that would otherwise repair themselves through supernatural means. Loyal Knight houses bear the primary responsibility for hunting their fallen kin, a duty they accept with grim determination. The shame of Knight betrayal falls upon all who share the tradition, creating a collective obligation to eliminate those who have corrupted the ancient ways. Houses Terran, Krast, and Hawkshroud maintain specialized formations dedicated exclusively to tracking and destroying Chaos Knights, their pilots selected for psychological resilience and equipped with Thrones Mechanicum that have been specially warded against corruption. House Krast's Chainbreakers specialize in targeting war dog packs, employing tactics designed to isolate and eliminate the smaller knights before engaging their larger counterparts. Their Knights Errant carry specialized disruption weapons that interfere with the pack bonding technologies used by corrupted war dogs, forcing them to operate as individuals rather than coordinated units. Once the pack bond is broken, the war dogs can be engaged sequentially, preventing them from concentrating their firepower on a single target. House Terran's Oathkeepers focus on dueling larger Chaos Knights, their pilots trained specifically to counter the unnatural movement patterns and warp-enhanced capabilities of corrupted Questoris and Dominus chassis. These specialists study extensive battle recordings of Chaos Knight engagements, learning to recognize the subtle tells that precede warp manifestations or demonic weapon discharges. Their knights are equipped with enhanced auto-sanctification systems that continuously bless their weapons and armor, reducing the effectiveness of demonic enhancements when in direct contact. The psychological burden on knights who hunt their corrupted kin cannot be overstated. The Throne Mechanicum's ancestral memories include the traditions and values that define knightly conduct, making the perversion of these principles by Chaos Knights particularly disturbing to loyal pilots. Many develop obsessive behaviors focused on purification and reaffirmation of their oaths, while others adopt increasingly extreme battlefield protocols designed to minimize exposure to corrupting influences. The Chainbreakers undergo monthly psychic screening by inquisitorial agents, with any pilot showing signs of warp contamination immediately removed from active duty and subjected to intensive purification rituals. The Inquisition's role in combating the Chaos Knight threat extends beyond battlefield operations, to include preventative measures designed to identify and eliminate corruption before it can spread throughout a Knight house. The Ordo Hereticus maintains surveillance networks on major Knight worlds, monitoring communications and resource allocations for patterns that might indicate early-stage corruption. Particular attention focuses on houses with historical grievances against imperial authority or those located near warp storms and other anomalies that might facilitate chaos influence. Inquisitor Cryptman's Throne Protocol establishes standardized procedures for evaluating Knight houses suspected of corruption. The process begins with covert observation by inquisitorial agents disguised as administrative adepts or mechanicus representatives, who monitor the house's adherence to traditional ceremonies and oaths. Any significant deviation from established practices triggers more invasive investigation, including direct examination of throne mechanicums during routine maintenance cycles. Knights found with early-stage corruption are quietly removed from service, their pilots subjected to intensive interrogation to determine whether the taint originated from the machine or the noble. When corruption extends beyond individual knights to affect significant portions of a house, the Inquisition's response becomes more dramatic and public. The purging of House Marikai in the 39th millennium established the template for such operations, combining military force with psychological warfare designed to separate still loyal elements from their corrupted kin. Inquisitor Vale's forces secured the house's ancestral fortress through a precision strike that captured the High King and his inner circle, then broadcast evidence of their corruption to the remaining knights, along with offers of amnesty for those who submitted to immediate screening. This approach successfully preserved nearly 60% of House Marikai's knights, while identifying and eliminating the corrupted leadership. The surviving nobles underwent extensive psychological conditioning and had their thrones mechanicum subjected to purification rituals before being reorganized under new leadership drawn from distant branches of the family untouched by corruption. While controversial among more puritanical inquisitors who advocated for the destruction of the entire house, this selective purging approach has become standard practice when contamination appears contained rather than systemic. For Knight houses themselves, the threat of internal corruption has led to the development of specialized roles and protocols designed to identify and eliminate taint before it can spread. House Griffith maintains a cadre of knights known as Truth Seekers, who operate independently from the main command structure, with authority to challenge any pilot whose behavior raises concerns. These specialists undergo additional psychic training that allows them to sense warp contamination in both machines and pilots, identifying corruption before it manifests in visible behavior changes. The Truth Seekers' authority extends to ordering emergency shutdown of suspicious knights and mandatory examination of their throne's mechanicum, overriding even the High King's command in matters of potential corruption. This system of internal checks has successfully identified and eliminated 12 instances of incipient chaos influence within House Griffith over the past century, preventing what could have developed into full-scale house corruption if left unchecked. Perhaps the most extreme preventative measure employed by loyal Knight houses is the succession purge practiced by House Tyrannies. When a Knight pilot dies, their throne mechanicum undergoes complete psychic cleansing before being assigned to a new noble, regardless of how the previous pilot perished. This process, conducted by specially trained sacristans working alongside mechanicus adepts, involves dismantling the neural interface components and subjecting each to individual purification rituals before reassembly. While time-consuming and occasionally damaging to the ancestral memories stored within the throne, this practice has given House Tyrannies one of the lowest corruption rates among major Knight houses. Not all knights who stray can be classified as irredeemably corrupted. The Imperium recognizes a distinction between those fully given to chaos and those who have committed transgressions, but retain some connection to their original values. For these redeemable cases, specialized protocols exist to evaluate and potentially recover both knight and pilot before corruption becomes permanent. The right of contested fate, developed by Inquisitor Eisenhorn based on ancient Mechanicus texts, provides a framework for challenging the corrupting influence within a knight's systems. The ritual involves connecting the suspect throne mechanicum to a specialized cogitator containing incorrupt copies of the house's traditional oaths and ceremonies. By stimulating the ancestral memory components with these pure traditions, while simultaneously applying sanctified electro-canticles to disrupt chaos influence, the ritual can sometimes restore the original machine spirit's dominance over corrupting entities. The success rate for such interventions remains low, approximately 20% according to classified inquisitorial records, but represents the only alternative to destruction for knights showing early signs of corruption. The recovered knights typically require extensive rebuilding of components too thoroughly contaminated for cleansing, and their pilots must undergo rigorous psychological reconditioning before returning to active service. Even after these precautions, both knight and noble remain under perpetual surveillance, their battle data analyzed for any signs of recurring corruption. Sir Darius Hellbreak of House Crast represents one of the most celebrated redemption cases in recent Imperial history. After extended operations against Dark Eldar raiders in the Ghoul Stars region, Hellbreak's knight began exhibiting subtle signs of corruption, increased aggression in combat, disregard for collateral damage among civilian populations, and modifications to weapon systems that maximized suffering rather than combat effectiveness. Rather than executing the veteran pilot immediately, Housecrast's truth seekers ordered him into isolation while Mechanicus specialists examined his knight. The investigation revealed that Dark Eldar technology recovered during Hellbreak's campaigns had been incorporated into his knight's sensory systems, creating pathways for corrupting influence despite no direct chaos involvement. The Xeno's components were designed to enhance the pilot's experience of inflicting pain, creating a feedback loop that gradually normalized increasingly extreme behavior. Because the corruption stemmed from technology rather than direct warp influence, Mechanicus adepts determined that complete cleansing remained possible if the contaminated components could be identified and removed. The purification process took nearly a year, with Hellbreak conscious throughout, as Mechanicus surgeons removed compromised neural interfaces from both his body and the throne mechanicum. Each removed component was replaced with sanctified Mechanicus technology, accompanied by rituals reaffirming Hellbreak's oaths to House and Emperor. The psychological rehabilitation proved as challenging as the physical reconstruction, requiring Hellbreak to consciously recognize and reject the patterns of thought implanted by the corrupted systems. When finally declared clean by both Mechanicus specialists and inquisitorial psychers, Hellbreak returned to service with a unique perspective on corruption and redemption. His knight, renamed Truth's Burden, bears special wards against Xeno's influence, and Hellbreak himself now serves as House Crast's foremost authority on identifying early-stage corruption. His experience demonstrates that with sufficient determination and proper Imperial resources, some knights can be reclaimed from the brink of damnation. The ongoing battle against Chaos Knight corruption represents one of the Imperium's most resource-intensive security operations, consuming vast quantities of specialized equipment and highly trained personnel. The strategic importance of knight houses as military assets justifies this expenditure, as does the devastating impact when a house falls to chaos. Each recovered knight represents technology that would require decades to replace, while each corrupted engine destroyed prevents incalculable damage to Imperial worlds and populations. As the 41st millennium draws to a close, and the galaxy faces unprecedented chaos incursions following the formation of the Great Rift, the hunt for corrupted knights has intensified, with warp storms isolating many knight worlds from regular Imperial contact. The risk of undetected corruption has increased dramatically. The Inquisition has implemented emergency protocols, authorizing local authorities to initiate containment operations against suspected Chaos Knights without waiting for specialized forces, recognizing that delayed response could allow corruption to spread beyond control. In this darkest hour, as humanity faces threats from all sides, the loyalty of knight houses remains a critical bulwark against destruction. The ancient traditions that define knightly conduct, honor, duty, sacrifice, stand in direct opposition to the corrupting influence of chaos. While individual knights may fall and even entire houses may turn from the Emperor's light, the institution itself endures. For every renegade knight that brings terror to Imperial worlds, a dozen loyal engines stand ready to hunt it down and destroy it, preserving the ancient traditions that have guided noble houses since before the Imperium's founding. The battle between loyal knights and their fallen kin represents more than military conflict. It embodies the eternal struggle between humanity's highest ideals and its darkest impulses. In the thunderous clash of these walking engines of destruction, the fate of worlds hangs in the balance, determined by whether nobility triumphs over corruption, whether duty overcomes temptation, whether the light of the Emperor ultimately prevails against the seductive darkness of chaos. For 10,000 years, this conflict has raged across the stars, and in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war, a war fought not just for survival, but for the very soul of humanity's most ancient and honored traditions.